Hello and welcome to episode 541 of Fergo and the Freak. I'm that bloke from Rugby League Project, Andrew Ferguson. You can find me on Twitter at AndrewRLP. Join me as always is the glorious LeagueFreak. You can also find on Twitter at LeagueFreak. How you going there, mate?
I'm going very, very, very well, Andrew. Actually, very, 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 very well. It's been a pretty cool couple of days for obvious reasons. And,
yeah, I assume you were probably on your Xbox and got a few games completed. Based on what we said in the last episode, you were pretty chilled and knew this was going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's a very chill day. But before we get into the big game and talking about, obviously, the grand final, the NRL grand final, I want to talk about a GoFundMe that's been set up for a friend of mine that I actually play the Xbox with called Denise. On the 25th of September, we were playing the Xbox together between about 7 and 8, and normally we play for a lot longer. And it got to about 8 o'clock, and I was like, I said to her, do you mind if I jump off at the moment? Because, I'm just feeling chilled, and I was thinking I might watch a movie. And she says, yeah, I might do the same thing. Don't worry about it. We'll play tomorrow. Anyway, that night at about 11 o'clock, a fire started in her little girl's bedroom. It was an electrical fire started. And she managed to get out with the 3 kids, the dog and the cat, but they lost everything in that house fire. Everything. There's just nothing that they could salvage. And so Denise was left without a place to live, and all the clothes were gone. Everything was just gone. And so a GoFundMe has been set up for her. I'll put the link for that GoFundMe in the description of this podcast. It'll be the first thing you see on the description. It'll be the link for that. Anybody listening, if you can afford to give, even if it's a little bit, it would be awesome if you did, because as I said, Denise they lost everything. It's been really shattering, and it was kind of weird to go from just nothing was going on and just saying, talk to you tomorrow, we'll play the Xbox tomorrow, and then got a text message about 4 a.m. the next morning, and she said, I've lost everything. There was a house fire. So I saw video of the house after the fire too, and it was shocking. It was really shocking that it was a miracle that everyone got out. So, so I'll put that GoFundMe in the description. And if you can afford to give them just anything, $5, whatever, that would be fantastic. So I thought I'd reach out to listeners and talk about that for a moment before we get into the game.
Absolutely. Yeah. Anything you can dish out people, that'd be absolutely helpful.
Yeah.
All right. Let's get into this big dance, shall we?
Yes.
The big dance. We'll get that comment out of the way because that's what everyone calls it. Melbourne Storm have beaten. No, they haven't. No, they haven't, people. I know everyone seems to be thinking that this is going to be the last year for Penrith. Just no. Penrith come out, they beat Melbourne in the grand final 14-6. It was, I'll be honest, okay, I had to work on this day, got stuck back late, so I didn't get to see any of the first half, and I saw most of the last 12 minutes of the game, and I've watched highlights of, some of the key moments of the game around that. So, what I have seen and heard, though, is this game was fast. It was basically non-stop. From what I have seen, it does give me some recollections of what it was like watching that 1989 grand final, which at the time was insanely fast compared to the rest of the game then, because that was before the 10-metre rule came in, and that game just didn't stop.
Well, it was really interesting that the game started extremely, extremely fast, and both teams were on. That was the thing that really come across early on in the game, is that Melbourne were on and Penrith were on. And it was really clear from the get-go that Penrith were trying to get Melbourne's, and you and me hate this term, but their middle forwards. They were getting their middle forwards moving from side to side as much as they could. They were really attacking around that area of the field, switching the play back and forth, and not really attacking their edges too much, just keeping it mostly in the middle of the field. There was a lot of really big contact. The Storm's back their Storm's wingers were really carrying the ball a lot more than they normally do. And I think that a lot of that was to really try and take pressure off their forwards, who you could see were getting tired probably 30 minutes into the match. You could see they definitely were struggling to hold on in tackles and things like that, but they were doing it still. Like they were getting worn down, but they weren't breaking. Melbourne scored the first try through, there was a video challenge that went against Penrith, and there was a kick to touch that was a great kick from Hughes. He must have made about bloody 40 metres from the kick from touch. And then they got basically a set on Penrith's line, and then they got over. So they put the first points on the board, and it was kind of a little bit against the run of play in terms of Penrith had the better field position, and they had the field position, and they had a bit more possession of the ball. So that was interesting. And you knew Penrith had to hit back, and because I think the key to this game was always going to be if the Storm could get off to a good lead and then hold it against Penrith, because we've seen that Penrith come home strong pretty much in every single game. Penrith did manage to hit back pretty soon, and they did it through, I believe that was the pass that Cleary put onto, what's his name, the second row? He won the Clive Churchill medal. I've already forgot his name.
Some random human.
He's a pretty good player.
I wanted to say about that, the Harry Grant try is, the thing that surprised me about it is he's drifted left. He's put on a little bit of a stutter step because he didn't really have too many options going outside him. And sometimes we've seen him this year, he'll do that against poorer defensive sides. And he won't always get through, but he'll get close enough to the line to sort of force the defensive line to compress around where he ran, which then opens up opportunities out wide. So it looked like he was doing one of those runs. He put that little stutter step on, but got through the line enough to actually get himself over for the try, which was full credit to him because unbelievable effort.
It was a big moment, and you could see when he scored it, I mean, he was over the moon, and they kind of, as I said, it was a bit of against the run of play. It was in the 22nd minute, and then the next try was actually a try to Ruva.
That's right.
It was only 4 minutes later. It was over in the corner. The Panthers stripped them a little bit, and then Taruv was able to fly into the corner. Basically, he had a straight run to the corner, and he did that. And then it was just before half time, because at that point, it was really kind of even. Like you were like, they're still evenly matched. And then it was the next try was when Penrith went from one edge, they went to the middle of the field, and Luai immediately switched it back out to the right edge again. Cleary kind of he isolated basically Cameron Munster and then put the pass on to Liam Martin. And you could see as soon as the pass went on, you saw Munster was like, I just got beat. Yeah. And Martin, I mean, he's one of those players where if if you're going to tackle him, that's fine, but you might die in the process because he's going to try and destroy as he does it. He got in for that try, and just Penrith being up at half time, it felt like it was significant, you know?
Yeah.
The Melbourne Storm have a fantastic record when they're leading at half time in pretty much any situation. So that lead was really big. Coming into the second, one of the interesting things was looking at the dressing sheds at halftime, and the Panthers looked focused. They looked like they were still in the game. They were all focused on everything. The Storm looked tired, and you could understand why. There was a stat that come up in this game. I think it was about 36 minutes or so into the match, and it said that the ball had been in play for like 33 minutes or something like that, which was that doesn't make sense. Like you would think that it would have been out for more. In the second half, it was more of the same, and eventually both sides started to tire because it was so quick. And then we got a try from Alamotti in the 60th minute. He had a great game in this one. But it was a typical, like, the Storm, the thing that gets me is the Storm were on. They were on in this game. They were trying things. Their backs were really making good yardage, like taking pressure off their forwards. And Penrith they just kept strangling them slowly. And it really was a fitting contest between these two clubs in that the Storm has had such an incredible season. It's been one of the best seasons the club has had in the last 10 years. And we'd be talking about it so much more if it wasn't for this Panthers team just being around. And the Panthers just kept strangling them. And you just saw them just squeezing the life out of the Storm. And it was really incredible to see. But you felt like the Storm could have still put on a couple of quick tries at the end. Like they were always probing, they were always trying. And that Penrith defence is like otherworldly. They're the best defensive team I've ever seen in my lifetime by a very long way now.
Yeah, comfortably.
Yeah, we've talked about this a lot. It used to be Manly, I think, for both of us in the mid-90s, like 96.
Yeah.
It's just not even a contest anymore. It's this Panthers team. And, you know, I think for the Panthers, the thing was that their worst player was probably like a 7.8 out of 10. And that's what it come down to. They managed to keep Hughes and Munster and Pappenhausen pretty quiet. And those players threw a couple of shots and it was always cut down. But at the end of the day, it just felt like this game was about this unbelievable team we've been watching for, 5 years now, I think it's fair to say. Just, there's something different about them. You can talk about having a club where you tick off all of the right areas. You can say, well, we develop a lot of juniors. We recruit well. Our training is impeccable. All these different things. But I think now we have to talk about that some of these players in this Panthers side are just special. They've got that thing that whatever it was that made like a Wally Lewis 10 foot tall and bulletproof when he pulled on a maroon jersey. That's sort of special. It's whatever it was that when Darren Lockyer was in a game that was close, when Shane Webke was the best forward on the field in the 75th minute still, that special thing, whatever it is, there's a lot of these Panthers have it. And to see them win 4 in a row, I felt stunned by it. Last year I was super emotional when they won 3 straight because it was like finishing rugby league. It was like beating the final boss. Winning 3 in a row, I would never have imagined that. Winning 4 in a row was like hard to put into words because now they're only behind 2 other teams in all of the game's history of winning straight premierships. Like it's Penrith, and then it's the South Side from, I believe, the 20s, and it's the Great Dragons team that won 11 in a row. Penrith the third on that list. It's just those 3 clubs.
Yeah,
I can't believe it. They're doing it in a salary cap era, which I think probably condenses, like I was thinking about this today, I think it condenses the longevity of a true champion side, and yet they've still won 4 in a row. And the Storm played great. They played so great. And this Penrith team still fucking beat them. And it's just unbelievable. I can't believe we've seen this in our lifetime.
I'm going to say it looks to me when I was watching it and looking at some of the stats and stuff after it, that Melbourne planned for every possible thing they could think of that Penrith could throw at them, except for the one thing that happened, and that was Nathan Cleary running the ball all the fucking time. Cleary had more runs than any other Panthers player, 29 runs, and he ran for 212 metres. No halfback does that. And that's something that they just did not have a plan for, because that's not something he's done in a long time. They haven't planned for that. And Penrith were working a lot of their play off the back. It was almost like Cleary was playing like a third centre. It was insane at times.
Well, coming into it, people were talking about his shoulder. And I think he was I was always confident in him. Like it's the grand final for maybe going for 4 straight. If he didn't have a shoulder, I think he would have been out there. But I do think that it probably surprised them that he was so willing to run it and not sort of sit back a bit and just guide them around the field. And we've talked about he's the best running halfback that either of us have seen. Like it's not a case of he's one of the better runners. Like he's the best of them.
Yeah.
Especially in open field. Like you can maybe talk about plays close to the line. Alfie Langer was great close to the line. So was Andrew Johns. But in the whole field, you take the whole field into account, he's definitely the best running halfback.
Well, he's got a combination of this unbelievable sixth sense for knowing where the ball's going to turn up. And the only player I've seen who's had that ability in the past was Terry Lamb.
Yeah, he was good at that. Yeah,
best support player. He's got all of that about him, but he's got the leg drive and that drive through the hips that was what made Wally Lewis hard to tackle.
And he's a big dude. Like you
put him in a bigger body than those two blokes as well, and you're like, holy hell.
Yeah, and like he's strong as well. Like he's a big, strong dude. He's got a good frame on him, but he's filled that frame out really well. Starting to sound like Andrew Johns now. Jeez.
No, because you only mentioned the fatigue once.
I also only talked about him from like waist up as well.
That's right, yeah, but you got to drop fatigue another 35 million times. I'll say this quickly. When I got home, I legit meant this too, because I won't tweet about it. I got home and I put the TV on and I'm listening to it and I went, all I could hear was Andrew Johns going, fatigue. I was like, I can't listen to this fucking dickhead. So I put it on mute, which sucked. But I had to. So I put it on mute and I was watching the League Unlimited website. They've got their own live updates they do, which is just typed up stuff. I do them all the time on there. Yeah. And I was reading what they were putting on there and watching the game that way. And I thought, this is just, I can't listen to Andrew Johns anymore. He's the worst thing that's on TV right now.
He's not very good. But yeah, Cleary running the ball a lot probably did catch them off guard. But this game felt like almost like a battle of wills. And both teams, the thing that I loved is that both teams were up for it. And you can't watch the game and say like, Melbourne weren't at their best. It wasn't a case of that. Like we got the matchup we wanted. And it was always going to take something really special to win this game. And Penrith they proved that they're a special team, man. I mean, and we knew that already, but it was like, if Melbourne had beaten Penrith, we would have all said, you know what? Penrith had 3 straight premierships, but to start it, they were beaten by Melbourne, and to end it, they were beaten by Melbourne. And that would have been like, all right. But now history is going to look at this and say, Penrith beat everyone. Like there wasn't a team that they missed. There wasn't a team they got around. They weren't lucky with somebody who was really good, but they had an injury. They got everyone and they beat everyone. And, it was being called the last ride because of course it was. There was Michael Jordan did that documentary about himself, The Last Ride. I'm really looking forward to next June when Penrith are really good and people go like, wait a minute, wasn't last year the last ride? What's going on?
It's going to be interesting. I think I genuinely do think though that the biggest challenge they've got coming up in this 5-year run will be next year because I think a lot of people have deluded themselves into thinking that Lua wasn't that important. And we saw, if you needed any evidence at all, this year was that evidence because he carried this Panthers team with zero fanfare. He carried them through the whole period that Cleary wasn't there.
Yeah.
And with him gone next year, that does expose Cleary a little bit to the point where if Cleary's going to be injured, it's going to have a much bigger impact on the team's performance. They will have to change their style to combat having both Luai and Cleary out of the team.
Yeah, and look, Jack Cole's going to come into that Luai spot, and when Cleary and Cole are in, they're going to be really good. Like,
they'll be fine.
No question about that. But it's when Cleary is injured that then all of a sudden, like, who are they going to have? Cole and Snyder? Like, I've got no problems with Cole. I think Cole's a really good player to bring in, but Snyder's not a first grader.
Yeah, Cole's going to be fine. I wouldn't be surprised if they genuinely consider Cole at 7 and Edwards at 6 for those games where Cleary doesn't play, because I would rather have Edwards at 6 than have Schneider in the team. I don't care you put a fullback, but I'd just rather that, because Schneider's not. He's just not it, man.
Yeah, he's just not. Yeah, we'll see. It's a really nice problem to have.
Well, it is, yeah. Now, look, before we go too much further, we do have to discuss the massive elephant in the room, and that was the disallowed try.
Yeah.
Now, when I first watched it live, I didn't think he got anywhere near close to scoring it, and it wasn't until they showed the replay that I went, "Oh, geez, that did get a lot closer than I realised."
That's how I felt too.
But I'll say this: I wasn't confident that the try was scored, but I was surprised at how confident that the bunker was that it wasn't scored, because they didn't really take too much time to come to their decision. I was a little bit surprised, given the moment in the match where it was. I think Penrith were only up by 4 at that stage. Pretty pivotal, because if Melbourne scores, we've got the game as leveled up. It looked like they looked at 2 replays and went, "Yeah, that's good enough."
Yeah, and look, when I saw it live, I was like, "He's held up. Oh, I think he's held up. Oh my God, he's held up." And then they showed the first replay, and I was like, "He's held up." And as I'm thinking that, Andrew Johnson's like, "Oh, it's a try. Oh, it's a try." And I'm like, what the fuck is he talking about? Like, that seems like he was held up to me. And I tweeted about it. I was like, what the fuck are the commentators talking about? And people had to go at me over it. And then, I think it might have even been during the game, they said how the NRL has 4K monitors. They've got a bunch of different views, and they had a view that was really clear cut that it wasn't a try. And they really should have put that out during the game. They should have tweeted that out on their feed, but they didn't. They showed it to journalists after the match and then got it out. They just got it out too late. I've put the video of that on my website. If you go to leaguefreak.com and look for it, I think it's the 3rd article that's on my website. And you can see it was just clearly held up. But the footage that was being put around social media, it looked like there was the ball you could see at the top, his arm, and then something wide at the bottom. And it looks like it's the ball coming down, and it's actually a player's arm. And the footage that you can see that I posted on my website, it's really clear that it was held up. And I'm really glad that footage is there, and I've talked about this, like, if you think you've been dudded by a call like that in the grand final, it's something you're going to carry. And I don't want people to have that, especially Storm fans, that it's like, oh, we got screwed out of this try. Like, they're feeling bad enough as it is. You don't want them to feel worse that if they think they got screwed over. So I'm glad that the footage is actually out there of what actually happened, because, it was going to be like this big problem. And thankfully they made the right call. And you can see when you watch that footage, like, it's just really clear he didn't get the ball down by some friggin' miracle. Like, the Panthers just swarmed him. They were like ants. They were just all over him all of a sudden. Got a bunch of hands and arms and stuff under the ball, and like did a great job to hold him up. But it was really clear they did hold the ball up.
For me, the thing that's been funny about it is, as we both know, in rugby league amongst the fans, there's always been very, very strong case of tall poppy syndrome that goes on.
Yeah.
So when your team's successful, everyone fucking hates you. And because the Melbourne's always been successful, plus, they do hang on to the grudges, the fans. So, the salary cap thing is still there.
Mm-hmm.
It's been over a decade, still there. People weren't really that keen for Melbourne to win. But because Penrith had won the last three, I'm not so keen for Penrith to win either.
Mm.
So it was always interesting to watch them do that delicate little dance between caring about whether that was a try or not and caring about whether it meant that Melbourne or Penrith would win. It's been rather, I don't know. I found that that whole situation rather amusing, to be honest.
Yeah, it's weird, and like I've talked about how it's been different for me as a Panthers fan the last few years, in that, like we were a team for the most part that most people didn't really think about, and I get why. We'd only won a couple of premierships, and then all of a sudden we start doing some things, and it's like you start seeing like their comments that Storm fans are used to, and they're like, please. We've been getting this shit for fucking our entire existence. And like the weird things people would try and have a dig at the Panthers over, like I think I said in the last episode, I had a Roosters fan saying that not all of our players are local juniors, and
of all the people to pop up about that. How's about you just take a seat there, fella?
Yeah. So somebody pointed out to them that they had more Panthers juniors in the Roosters team than Roosters juniors.
I don't even know why this constant discussion by fans is even relevant anymore.
What's that?
Well, how many local juniors you've got. I mean, you look around now and go, how many people are there playing in the NRL at all different clubs who are not even Australian born? They're from New Zealand, Tonga, Samoa, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's tons of them.
I think it's very important, personally.
It's good that they're bringing the players through. I don't see how it's that important anymore. The whole structure of the game and how it's built is about making sure that we get as many of these elite level players playing in the NRL as possible. That's kind of what a salary cap's for.
Yeah,
if you've got a massive nursery that's just creating, 50 players every 2 years that are NRL quality, you're not going to be able to put them in the NRL side, so they're going to have to go somewhere else. There's nothing you can do about that.
But here's the thing. If you've got an NRL team that's servicing that junior area, fantastic.
Yes.
If you have an NRL team that doesn't service a junior area, why?
No, I get that, but that's the thing is that they're there. But
I know,
but even if they're not servicing an area, or if they're only bringing through, say, 10 local juniors in 5 years, compared to the other one, maybe bringing out 40 or 50 in the same period.
Mm-hmm.
The factor is those players from the larger area are going to have to go somewhere.
Yeah,
they can't all play for Penrith.
Without question.
So that's just what's going to happen. That's why we still got a lot of people, and this has gone on for ages, from West Tigers juniors. They never played for the club. There's a reason for that.
Yeah.
Not just the fact the club's been absolutely atrocious at retention and recruitment and stuff, but because you can only put 30 players in your squad, and if you bring in 50 or 60 through, they're going to have to go somewhere. So even when the Tigers have been woeful, they've still had West Tigers juniors or people from that region have still been making NRL debuts.
Yeah, and they service an area. But I think the thing about local juniors is that nobody's going to look at, say, a team like Penrith or even the West Tigers, where they'll say, you know what, they shouldn't have a team. Like, why do we have the West Tigers? Because it services a very big junior rugby league area, right? And you can say that about Parramatta. You can say that about the Bulldogs. You can say it about Manly. They service a junior rugby league area. Say it about the Sharks. They service a small one. Hey?
The Bears.
Well, I just think that's the reason why.
No, I get it.
Every team should be aiming to do what the Panthers have done, just in terms of this is a team that built a junior base where there wasn't one. right? And that's what every team should do. Penrith started doing that. I mean, Penrith has had junior rugby league going back to 1908, and they've very long history of rugby league. So it's not like they started in 1967, but they built what they built over a very long period of time. It wasn't always the case that in the 70s people were saying, "Oh, but Penrith has this great junior base, says giant junior base." That wasn't the case. They had to really work to build that up. And they have. And a lot of clubs have. And some clubs haven't. And I think that means something to people. And that's why they bring it up. Because some clubs are freeloading in that regard. And I don't need to name names. I'm not going to say the Roosters in Melbourne. I'm not going to do that. But some clubs are freeloading. You can't say that about the Panthers.
Let's be honest, okay. Melbourne, I don't think Melbourne was ever properly set up to be generating its own talent. Its existence is kind of the same as, let's see, I don't know, maybe all the Gold Coast teams. Except the difference with the Gold Coast teams is they do have a massive amount of juniors, but they just don't know how to run an actual sporting team, not just rugby league. Any sporting team. They don't know how to be run there. They know how to make juniors, and that's about it. But Melbourne was all about, we just wanted to have a team in this market. And they never set anything up beyond that.
Exactly.
Which is frustrating.
Well, it's wrong.
They've got a whole state.
Mm-hmm.
You can't find 30 people every 5 years out of 5 million.
Mm-hmm.
What the hell?
Look, I had people saying, leading up to it, lining up the Panthers with, Melbourne, it's unfair. And it's like, yeah, it is. Melbourne has an entire state. As you say, Penrith has a region of Sydney. It's a big region, to be fair, but it is one region of Sydney, and they have, 8 competitors in that region that are literally a car drive away.
Yeah. And look, the biggest one will be the Tigers too, given that it's right next door, basically.
Yeah, pretty much. But if you're around for 25 years and you've only got a couple of juniors to show for it, local juniors to show for it, I'm sorry, that's not good enough.
Of course not.
If that's going to upset people, I don't fucking care at this point. Everyone's 4 straight premierships on the back of local Penrith juniors. So, maybe if the Storm had a few more local juniors, maybe it'd be different. And that's what they should be thinking.
Yeah. It's weird. I get why they're doing the way they are, because they know that if they have any number of seasons of not being somewhat successful, that their fear is that the viewers that they've got may be fickle and they may just disappear permanently. So they've got to constantly try and get whatever players they can find and keep them for as long as possible to maintain the level of success that they've always been having, which they've done very well. But yeah, it does mean that there's not been enough emphasis put on local juniors.
Yeah. Look, before the game, they do the thing where the players introduce themselves and say they're junior club. And the Melbourne Storm go through theirs, and they're from everywhere except Victoria.
Yeah, most of them are from Queensland.
Yeah. And that's fine. Look, at the end of the day, do I care? No. Beat all of those guys too. But then Penrith did theirs. They had 6 players that played for the St. Mary's Saints alone, right? That's not even all their juniors from Penrith. That's not even counting Nathan Cleary and all the other Penrith juniors. It's just 6 from the St. Mary's Saints. And I thought, first of all, that makes you really proud. Because I've said before, St. Mary's Saints was you got Tregear, and then Tregear is cut off from St. Mary's by Ropes Creek, and the exact side of Ropes Creek is St. Mary's Saints. And so that was my local leagues club. And it's cool to see so many of them, everyone anybody that's been a local junior has played for St. Mary's Saints, basically. It's a source of pride for people. If the Canterbury Bulldogs won a premiership and their team was full of local juniors, it would mean more to them. You could say that about every single other club. but there are some clubs that you literally cannot say that about. And I think that the time for that sort of freeloading needs to be over. And I think the way you do that is you link the money that the NRL gives in the grant beyond the salary cap, which is about $5 million at this stage. They get about $10 million to cover the cap and an extra $5 million on top of that. That needs to be directly linked to the size of your local juniors that you have, not some special scheme where not something like, we go into schools like the AFL plays with their numbers like that, right? It needs to be real local junior rugby league football 17-man game sort of stuff. And that's what it should be linked to. And if a team like Penrith gets $5 million a year for it, and say a team like the West Tigers would get $5 million a year for it, and a team like Parramatta would get like $4.8 million a year for it, then teams like the Roosters and the Melbourne Storm should be at the absolute other end of the scale. And that's how I think it should be.
$50?
If that. And
what change?
Yeah. They get a bill. And that's not about the NRL. That's about the future of the sport. Because if we have every single NRL club saying the way for us to get better is to invest millions of dollars in junior rugby league would be in a sickeningly good state. It would be amazing for the game, just like we see in Penrith right now. Every other team should be looking at what Penrith's doing and saying that's the model. And that's what the NRL's incentive should all be towards.
So can I ask you now, change of pace?
Okay. Let me get off my high horse for a second.
You still on?
Okay, no, I just jumped off.
Okay, I was going to say, looking forward, and this is, let's be honest, this is going to be a big dick decision that you're going to make here, all right? And that is, do you see Penrith next year making the grand final? Not talking about winning or losing, just making it. Given the changes that you got coming up and everything else.
Yes, I would be shocked if they didn't, and I can tell you why. I did my top 8 for next year, right? Mm-hmm. So let me bring it up. It's on my website too. I'm not plugging just my website this entire episode, I promise.
LeagueFreak.com.
LeagueFreak.com. I'm not promoting LeagueFreak.com for your up-to-date rugby league information, Andrew. I'm not doing that.
That's fine. Yeah, I wouldn't want you mentioning LeagueFreak.com anywhere. We're not into that sort of...
No. It would be gross.
Pandering.
It would be gross if we kept saying LeagueFreak.com over and over again. So here's my top 8. Yep. And I'll justify it to you. Melbourne Storm number 1. They're not really losing anyone, and this will burn them. And the Storm are one of those teams where if they're burnt, they will come back stronger the next year. I have Penrith finishing number 2 because they are losing a few players. But as I said, I think we'll get to June and people will be like, what was that last dance shit? They lied to us, right? I think the Bulldogs will be number 3. I'll go through the rest of the top 8 really quick. Mm-hmm. Bulldogs number 3, Sharks number 4, Broncos coming back, number 5, North Queensland number 6, Canberra number 7, Manly number 8, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, it might be different. It might not. Who knows? Of those non-Storm teams, who do you think wants to play the fucking Panthers?
Look, the thing for me is, okay, I agree with the fact that it's hard to say that Penrith won't be there.
Yeah.
I want to see how they evolve again.
Okay.
Because they've had to do it before, okay? They had to evolve when Coruscant left because that would change their attack immensely.
Yeah, really, really big. It's more refined now, but when it first happened, I was losing my mind over it.
Their attack dropped off pretty bad for Penrith. Their defence didn't change. It was still insane. And so they were able to still get by with that. And we still haven't seen their attack get back to what it was when Coruscant was there. But it doesn't need to be scoring 50 points every second week or whatever. But that was the biggest change that I had to deal with. They got around that. But Luai's the big one. And I think if if Cleary stays fit next year and he plays nearly all the games, I can't see how Melbourne will be higher on the ladder than them. But if Cleary misses 6 to 10 games again, I think they'll lose more of those games than they win because they don't have Lua there to drag this team. Because, as we've said before in other episodes quite a while back, a lot of people didn't realise how good Lua was until we saw him at the World Cup. And he dragged Samoa through that final.
Yeah. And you and me were watching that World Cup going like, yeah, this is him. Like, this has been him the whole time. People just didn't realise it.
Yeah, and they were, had the foggy glasses on because of the, arrogance bullshit that the media were feeding them. Yeah. Going, no, this, I mean, and even still, like, I knew he was always good, but he even went beyond my expectations at World Cup because he was, for some of those games, he was playing 5'8" halfback and hooker.
Yeah.
What the fuck, boy? Just...
You had to see it and be like, wait a minute, he's doing all three of those roles. How is this even possible?
Just drifting in and out every tackle. It's just insane to watch.
And his halves partner was Anthony Milford.
Yes.
Who was worse than having nobody there. And so he just was like, I'm going to do everything. And he did.
I'll just do it. Don't worry about it, boys. I got this. It was just insane to watch.
Yeah.
That, to me, that's a player you can't replace, which means, just like Cora said, you can't replace him. So what you've got to do is find a suitable person to take over that role that will complement Cleary enough, but you will have to change parts of your attack in order to make it work. Yeah. Defensively, the team structure doesn't change. Doesn't matter who drops out of that. The defensive structure won't change, and so that part will still stay insane. There's nothing that will change that other than 6 players leaving, from the first grade side, which just isn't going to happen. The other one is going to be Fisher Harris's departure. I don't think enough has been said about his departure because that's another huge hole that's going to get left because it's not just, I don't know, I get this impression a lot of people think that forwards are just blokes who just run hard at walls and then tackle stuff that runs at them. But he's got a big motor. He makes good post-contact meters all the time, has a great offload, has a good step close to the line. It's these little extra things that he's got that makes him that little bit more polished than most of the other forwards out there. And that's what makes him hard to replace. And so that's going to change up their attack a little bit too, because they can't just loiter around Fisher Harris looking for an inside ball all the time. It's not going to be coming as frequently.
I think that Lindsay Smith and the way he's come on this whole season, and he's been named in the Australian team, I think that he is a big step towards covering Fisher Harris, and then Liam Henry as well. He's an interesting player. He's got very good leg speed for a big forward, but he didn't have the leg drive once he got to the line, and he's starting to get the leg drive now.
Yeah.
And so they're two really good, it's not a like for like replacement.
No, but they fill the majority of the gap left.
Yeah. And it just, all they really need is another big man for depth, basically, in terms of and that's where you're looking at their junior base. And we've said this a little bit. Their junior base needs to spit out a couple of internationals over the next couple of years to keep this going. And that normally is pretty good for that. And I'm almost banking on that a little bit too.
Yeah.
But the Cleary thing, when Cleary's out next year, unless they can find a veteran halfback from somewhere, or get, Jack Cogger back or something like that, it's going to be very difficult when he's not there. I think that Cole stepping into Luai's position when Cleary is there is going to be and this is, everyone knows what I think of Luai. I'm not talking him down or anything, but I think it's going to be a very good replacement. And I think his skill set Cleary will be able to work with really well so that it won't be a completely devastating loss. He'll do a really good job next year. And I was surprised he didn't play more part in the rest of the season. When he sort of came out of Penrith's rotation, he was looking bloody good. He's a really good ball runner, takes on the line great. His defence improved out of sight from the start of the year to when he came out the rotation. And, so that I'm banking on those things, as I was banking on things with other clubs too when I read out that top 8. So that's why. And then, look, if you get Penrith to the finals next year and Cleary's good, they're just something different. And I think that it's really only the Storm at the moment who wouldn't be shitting themselves playing the Panthers in next year's final series. And that's just banking on the Storm not falling apart like every other fucking Penrith opponent has after they got panthered in the grand final. So, but I don't expect that from the Storm. I can't speak highly enough of what I think of the Storm.
No, completely agree with all that too.
Can we read an email and then we'll start talking about some history?
I was about to suggest that we should probably check out the emails. Have we had any?
Yes, we had one from Ian. He sent one today from Ireland, which is so cool.
And so is that Ian? Is it Eon?
Yeah, it's Eon, but you say Ian.
Like Eon Crossing. Remember when Eon Crossing was playing? Everyone was trying to all the commentators were trying to say his name was either Ion or Eon.
Yeah. See, we're cultured, so we knew it was Ian straight away.
Yeah, we'll just tell you how it should be sounded. That's the Australian way.
Do you reckon Ian is like, why are they saying it with that stupid accent?
It's Eon, you stupid bloody Aussie kids.
Oh, shit. Anyway, he says, he sent a long email. He says, gents, words escape me. I'm watching the grand final here for the second time at home in Dublin. A few points of note on second viewing. Number one, what the Panthers have done should be studied across other sports. It is simply incredible. To lose the players they have due to the salary cap and maintain their level of performance and success is a feat that words can scarcely describe. I cannot think of another team in professional sports, bar perhaps the Patriots, who have had such a sustained success in spite of salary cap implications. And I would agree. It's probably the Patriots, the Golden State Warriors, but they didn't win back to back, hey, which is kind of crazy when you think about that.
Modern teams, it just doesn't happen anyway. So I can't think of a team where you can compare it anyway.
Yeah, I don't know enough about all the soccer leagues around the world to be able to talk about them, but they don't have a salary cap anyway. But yeah, it's insane. It's freaking insane. Number two, this is Ian's email. Back to Ian's email. Number two, the foundation of Penrith's success is not built on greats like Yo, Cleary, James Fisher-Harris, and To'o et al., but on the shoulders of everyday men like Scott Sorensen, Mitch Kenny, and Lindsay Collins. They are relentless and ruthless and epitomise everything that makes the Panthers great. I would also classify Liam Martin in this category, the most underrated player in the league despite being an origin back rower. I agree with all that, hey? Number four, Ivan Cleary's tactics for the game were obviously excellent in exploiting the absence of NAS. That's
Solomona,
yeah. However, what sets him apart is his spotting and subsequent development of players like Luke Garner and Paul Alamotti, who have become mainstays. The Penrith underage is developing high-quality talent that Cleary no doubt further improves, but part of why he is a premier coach is because of his development of these previously unheralded gems. I think that's a really good point because, like, Garner took a while to settle at Penrith.
Yeah, look, I'll be honest. I'll say that for me, Alamotti looked the goods when he was at the Bulldogs.
Yeah.
I was surprised they didn't keep him. That bit didn't make sense to me. He looked good from the moment he got in, but Garner was, to me, he looked like he was going to be a depth signing. Didn't they lose someone?
It would have
Garner
been
Garner was basically a straight swap for him, was it?
it was
Peachy?
no, it was what's his name? He went to the Broncos and went to the New Zealand Warriors last
That's
year.
right. Kurt Capewell.
Kurt Capewell, that was it. He was basically his replacement.
That's right. He's basically going to be that you know,
or that
in quotation
role,
marks, edge forward, edge player sort of replacement sort of guy. That's what he was going to be. But he was going to be a reserve player for if they ever needed that.
Yeah.
And as you said, he did take a little while to come along, but this year was definitely the best year he's had at Penrith. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, 100%. And he went from like being a really handy role player in the team to he started having games where he was making a big difference and he was doing things. And like I know you and me, even when he was playing for the Tigers, were like, oh, Luke Garner, and then Penrith signed him immediately. We're like, holy shit, like fuck, what are the Tigers doing? And he's been really good for the Panthers this year. And he finally, I think he was probably a little bit restless in terms of like, is it going to work out? But now he seems to have like, he's really happy to be there. So that was cool. And Alamotti, I mean, he was a bargain buy and was outstanding. He's probably our best centre over the course of the entire year. So yeah, getting those guys, huge. Number 5, back to the email from Ian. Nathan Cleary is one of the great leaders of our generation. Aside from his outrageous talent, his mental fortitude is phenomenal. Year after year, he delivers. Cleary would be successful in whatever field he chose.
You know, I think that Yo and Luai are better leaders than Cleary.
You reckon?
Yes, but I would put Cleary down as being one of the most constantly emotionally in check humans I've seen playing the game of rugby league.
Yeah, he's so much like his dad in that sense.
Yeah, he's not phased.
Yeah.
But I don't see him as being the sort of person that leads his team around. I'm the sort of, you see, that's why they've got Yo as the captain.
I think that,
it's not beyond him. It's not beyond him in the future. But I just think at the moment, I don't typically see him as being a genuine out and out leader because he just seems a bit too chilled. Maybe that's just what it is. It's just that personality of him just seems a little bit too relaxed. Like, you know, if you compare his composure to that of Darren Lockyer, but Lockyer, he was a genuine leader. People followed him around everywhere. Cleary, to me, doesn't look like he's got that part of Lockyer's game. He's got the rest of it. Plus, he's a halfback with all these extra skill that Lockyer didn't have. But the leadership part, I just think, I don't know. To me, it's never looked like something that I've ever thought of Cleary as being like the long-term captain there, or, you know, he should be the leader instead of Yo and stuff like that. I think Yo is genuinely the leader of that club, and Luai looks like the sort of player for me that would absolutely command the attention and respect of the players, and that would also make him a really good leader.
I think that Cleary is like, because we sort of sometimes think of leaders as the guys that do all the talking. And like, I think of someone like James Fisher-Harris, who's the complete opposite of that, right? And I think Cleary is much more towards that end of it. And like, it's obvious that his teammates see him as a leader. Like, they do. I just think it's different styles of leadership sometimes, hey? I mean, look, in this Panthers side, they've got about, and this is another thing, they've got about 8 different leaders. Like, you look at someone like To'o, I think he leads the team in by the way he just will throw himself at a forward pack and just keep driving when his forwards need it every single set. And then you've got someone like Edwards, who I bet if you went up to him right now and said, are you a good footballer? He'd go like, oh, yeah, I guess. Like, he'd be the most unassuming, you know, person. But a Clive Churchill medalist and a 4-time premiership winner and we've seen him lead them to wins. You know,
Yeah.
I think maybe that's why this Penrith team is doing what they're doing, because they have all of these different types of leaders in their team.
I just thought of a good comparison. This is more about personality and less about playing style, because the playing styles are very different.
Yeah.
But Benji Marshall, he was a very carefree type player. But when he finally got made captain, it changed the way he looked at the team and the way he ran the team. And he did become a very, very good leader.
Yeah.
And it actually helped evolve his game as he had more and more years as being the captain and the leader. And so it changed the way he played in a good way. And I think that's probably the person that best describes the leadership for me with Cleary. I think he's at that point where he's not someone who I see as the leader now. He's someone I see as the leader in the future. And when he does become a leader in the future, I think the way he plays will change, and it will change to a way that is not too dissimilar to the way Daly Cherry Evans plays now.
Yeah.
It'd be less conservative with the ball running part. He'd be picking those moments a lot better, but still be like, he'll have even more insane control of how the game plays, and we'll just be steering it around the park with absolute ease.
He's the co-captain now, and
yeah,
there's probably a bit of it that they all grew up together and they're all like
second nature.
Yeah,
they know where everyone's going to be.
Yeah. There's probably that in it too, which a lot of the leaders we think of, but there's a shorthand between a lot of these Panthers players that we maybe mistake for, not talking as much or being as demonstrative as maybe you expect a leader to be. And I think you see, obviously I watch Penrith games really, really carefully, but you will see them all talking to each other and explaining things to look for on the field, defensively mostly, all the time. And that's just another little wrinkle in why they're so good right now. They're a very special team. It's kind of crazy. It's really crazy. That's how you get their center goes from the Panthers to the Bulldogs, and he becomes the fucking captain of the year. You know, it's that's the sort of thing they do. So look, Luai's going to go to the West Tigers next year, and we all know how it's going to turn out. He's going to be the man. He's going to walk in there, and everyone will fucking listen to him because there's no questioning. Like, you can't question these dudes because they have done everything. So, but yeah, it's an interesting thing to think about, huh?
It really is.
Number 6 on the email from Ian. Storm tried gamely, but I never felt they would win after Penrith got the lead. They will be back and no doubt will challenge again next year, which we both agree with for sure.
Yeah.
The main question is, was this email generated by AI? To quote Kanye, one of the great philosophers of our time, I guess we'll never know. He says, Freaky, I hope you enjoy this. It's a pleasure to watch your team. I'm backing them for 5 or even 6. Teams this good don't forget how to win. Oh, man, that's a really good way to put it. And he says, Fergo, you're lucky to be getting 2 quality players in Taruva and Luai. Tigers will hopefully not be as shit next year. Jesus, that was rough.
But the thing is, okay, and you'll notice this by the just looking and listening to the podcast this year compared to the last every other year.
Yeah,
is there's been no ranting about the Tigers and how shit they are, because finally the club has had the clean out where it needs to be, and it was never always about cleaning out the roster, cleaning out the coaches. That was never where the massive problem areas were. That was the last thing they needed to look at. The first thing they needed to look at was the dickheads who were signing all the players up and letting players go, and the decisions they were making behind the scenes. And that getting cleaned up and actually putting a competent rugby league administrator at the helm was, it can't be stressed as to how important and how significant that was. This year was never going to be much of a change from what had happened in the past. And I think I might have even said at the start of the year that if the Tigers get more wins this year than they had the previous year, then that's something to work on. I probably thought that they would get to 8 wins. They got halfway there, I guess, from what they did the previous year. They got 6. But still, it's things are moving in the right direction, because the other thing we saw was a lot of local juniors came into that side, and they're fucking brilliant. And so you get some genuinely good top quality players in each section of that field. So you got your back line, your halves, your forwards. You start getting some top quality humans in those areas who have won big games and they've played rep level alongside these young kids coming through. That's where you start getting those local talent coming through, and then they pick up their game and they start to grow and get better really fast. So next year, Galvin at 6 next to Law at 7 is going to be amazing to watch. And you've got, Galvin's going to have Corus out, hooker to help look after him in the front there. And he's going to have the brilliant, talented Buller at the back to, run off whatever passes he's got thrown out one way. And they've got these great young talents coming across in the back line. They've got a no-nonsense toiler in the forward pack in Royce Hunt coming across. He's not a game breaker, but just like most of the blokes who play in the forwards for the Sharks, right? You say what you want about their performance, stuff like that, but they did finish basically as the third best team this year because they didn't get completely outgunned like the Roosters did in that grand final qualifier. The Sharks forwards have never been a huge part of their problem, and they do work hard. Like, the problems that the Sharks have got are not within their forwards. It's to do with some players being constantly put out of position, like what's his name? The second row they keep putting at centre.
Talakai.
Oh man, that kills me.
Why do I remember Talakai and I can't remember bloody fucking Liam Martin?
Oh, it just kills me every year. They keep putting Talakai there. I'm like, man, just stop.
Yeah.
And it's little things like that. The other thing that we saw this year for the Sharks, which hopefully, and we saw it in the finals more than anything else, is that Trindle needs to be the halfback and Hines at 6. And I think that would work for both those players and that team so much better. Because I think what we've seen most from Hines is that he struggles with the play-by-play organisation of the team. He can come up with the plays and he can do all that sort of stuff, but it's the organisation stuff. Every tackle, we need you to be here. We need you to be going there so that we can work this way at the next play. That sort of stuff. It seems to be just that little bit too much beyond him. But if he's at 6 and that pressure's off him to do that, and he's just down playing what's in front of him, eyes up footy, that's what made him great when he was at Melbourne. That's what the Sharks signed him for. And I think if they put him back in that sort of a role at 6, we'll start seeing Hines play more like what he's supposed to, more of his natural game, which would be better for the Sharks. It's little things. They don't need to change much. It's little things. But their forwards are pretty good. And so for the Tigers to get one of those as well is pretty helpful. All they've got to do is get rid of Bateman.
Yeah, and he's still over in England at the moment, winning trophies with Warrington.
I was actually going to, I didn't get to do it, but I was going to tweet. There was that picture taken of the disallowed try for the Storm, the so-called contentious one.
Yeah.
I was going to put a caption on there saying, what's the difference between this picture and John Bateman? The difference was everyone in that picture is trying.
Oh, jeez, that's a rough one. Jesus.
Yeah, as they say in the classics, harsh but fair.
Yeah, exactly. So Ian's email ends with, all the best, man. Enjoy the off season. Thanks for the pod. Keep her lit. Your long-suffering Irish rep, Ian. So, by the way, Ian, we don't have an off season. Hey, we'll probably do less. We won't do weekly podcasts and stuff like that. But don't be shocked if we're like pushing out episodes about random moments in rugby league history that we normally would be doing during the year, but the season actually overtakes us a bit.
Well, we've got a big history episode coming up.
Yeah, gigantic.
Things massive. I mean, it's so big we've only recorded half of it so far.
Yeah, exactly. So now with all that out the way, we go to the history section of the podcast.
You need a historian for that.
That would be handy. That'd be really handy.
Should I duck out and you go get one?
let me get the pixie dust out. Okay, Andrew, you're a rugby league historian and statistician.
Hang on, let me just stroke my beard.
That's not your beard. That's not your beard, you filthy bastard. My long, thick beard.
I've got the webcam on again.
This history part really went downhill quick.
We just got to set the tone early.
I know. So Penrith now, in terms of teams that have won consecutive premierships, it's 11 by the Dragons. It's 5 by the South Sydney Rabbitohs in about the 20s. And now it's Penrith with 4, and then there's everyone else. Lots of teams have won 3 in a row, but they're the top 3 ever. Is it, in your opinion as a historian, is it fair to at least say this Penrith team is the 3rd best team of all time? Just going on what they've done so far, or do you think they need to do more for that? Or is it too early to know yet?
It's too early to know because I mean the difference between the teams of the past and Penrith now is we know how those campaigns finished out for those teams of the past.
Yeah.
So for the South side that won 1925 to 1929, they won those 5 straight.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't win the grand final in 1930, but they won 1931 and 32.
Mm-hmm.
So they kept going. And so you can compare that with the Panther side because they've lost 1 grand final in their current run. So if they can make 3 more grand finals, then you can compare them with that South Sydney side.
Yeah.
Right. So we know we can't put them against that South side of the 20s. And we know we can't put them against the Dragon side because the achievement hasn't matched up yet.
Yeah. And by the way, they would have to win 7 straight more grand finals to equal just the grand final part that the Dragons were in. And then they would have to make the finals for like another 16 years in a row.
That St. George team was ridiculous.
Yeah.
I can't stress how nuts they were.
I think they're probably the closest thing to what we would maybe see if the Panthers didn't have to deal with the salary cap in terms of imagine if this Panthers team had kept everyone they wanted to.
Yeah. I mean, look at this, okay. From 1939 until 1980, St. George missed 1, 2, 3, 4 final series.
That's insane.
4.
That's so. I can't imagine that. I just can't. In a top 5, by the way.
41 years.
Yeah.
37 of those are in the top 5.
Yeah.
We need to make people aware that we cannot put anyone up against that team because it's not a dynasty. It's not an era. That's fucking 3 generations.
Yeah.
It's insane. You can't go near it.
No.
That South team though of the 20s was pretty special. I think there's one thing that the St. George team in that run of 11 straight titles and the South team in their 5 straight.
Mm-hmm.
There's one little thing that they both did that this Penrith team hasn't done, and that is had 1 season where they're undefeated. I know it sounds fucking crazy.
Yeah.
And a lot of people will water it down and say, yeah, but they had less teams and the seasons were shorter and all that sort of stuff. And yes, that may well be the case, but still, you still have to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And an undefeated season, while all of those did take place in the past, There hasn't been many of them. There was Balmain in 1915. There was North Sydney in 1921, South in 25, and the Roosters in 36, 37, and St George in 59. We had 6 of them in 120 years. They're rare.
Yeah.
They're real rare. But nearly all of those teams, barring the Norse one where they only won 2 titles, and that undefeated season was one of them. All of those teams were part of a pretty strong era for those clubs, where that was like some of their absolute high points. Then they lasted several seasons with it. So I don't know if that's going to be a marker you can use to judge whether they should be in that conversation or not. But given the way the game's played now, the changes of it, the complications that the salary cap puts in place, I think you have to put them in the conversation. And the reason why is, you have to look at the fact that no team has done what they've done since St George.
Yeah.
That's 50, 60 years ago. It's nuts to think you have to go back that far to find a team that's done what this side has done. And that shows you what the current rules and what the salary cap has done to the game. It has leveled it out so much that doing what St George had done, doing what South did in the 20s, has become so damn near impossible to do. For Penrith to have gone and done it, it's I don't think people should be glossing over that so much or watering it down or having tall poppy syndrome. I said all along, like, people need to stop hating on them just long enough to go and realise that, when we're all 80, 90 years old, now kids are talking about, what was that great Panthers team like? He's saying, yeah, I saw them. Because there'll be a lot of fans who saw, fans from South and Balmain and North and West and East, they all saw that St George team and they all went, at the time, bloody hell, I wish someone would beat the St George side. But, 30, 40 years later, they're gone, man, what a team that was.
Yeah.
I saw them play. And we shouldn't be losing sight of that because it is absolutely history that we've just seen.
100%. And I think the other thing is too, like, people talk about the Panthers and the salary cap having to deal with that. That Dragons team and that South team that we've talked about, they all had their own things within their times that they had to deal with, whatever they would be. So I see people dismissing some of the pre-salary cap, great teams we've had by saying, oh, well, they didn't have a salary cap. It's like, yeah, they might not have had a salary cap, but they had their own things they had to work around as well. Players didn't play for as long. They didn't have the same medical treatment. You got a knee injury, your career was done,
That's right.
All sorts of things like that they had to deal with in their time. How about this? Not having game footage that you could study of your oppositions. Just all sorts of things like that. So that's why I never dismiss what's happened in the past, because everyone has had to deal with everything within their own era, and they've all had struggles of some type that they've worked against. And the Panthers one is their main one has been the salary cap, and they've dealt with that one like all the great sides have dealt with whatever their thing's been.
That's the thing. I think too, a lot of people talk about how, the game's changed, and they talk about, how the rules are and how they're different to the past. And they make out like the rules now are harder than the rules of the past. And some are, some aren't. I can guarantee you that if you were to take the rules of 1950, there's a fair chance that the top 8 will look completely different to what it was this year.
Yeah.
Some teams will, a team like Canberra and teams like Brisbane and the Titans, they'll start being really strong because it's all about having those big forwards. And all you got to do is hold the ball. You don't have to be a good attacking team. You just got to hold the ball. And so that changes the whole complexion of the whole season, how everything runs. It makes everything completely different. That's what people don't realise, is that the rules change in ways that's to work for some teams and against some teams.
Yeah.
That's just the nature of the beast. The classic example, if you want to see something in more modern times, look at how the rules changed in the early 2000s and how teams like the Cowboys and the Tigers absolutely benefited from it. And then as soon as they switched those rules off and switched it, both those teams fell down the ladder and they were gone for years.
Yeah, and look, another one is the when we very briefly had unlimited interchange, and it was just everyone turned into forwards and second rowers for a few seasons.
Yeah.
And once they limited the interchange, and they cut it back again a few years after, once they limited the interchange, those teams were fucked. They were completely stuffed. They had to completely change what they'd done. And it brought back more free-flowing football because of it. It was a great move, fantastic move, one of the best moves that's happened in my lifetime in the game. And so, yeah, everyone's had to deal with something like that. And you could also say with this Panthers team, and it was funny because at first it was used as like, yeah, but they won during the COVID thing when they were playing in Brisbane and stuff. And now that they've won all these other premierships, it's like, man, this Panthers team even won when they were in lockdown and had to play the only grand final in Brisbane and beat everyone playing in Queensland and stuff. And so where it was used as like trying to have a dig at Penrith at one point, it's just another thing they overcome. And now it's kind of like, wow, they did that too, which is kind of crazy when you think about it a few years down the track. I can't believe we're talking about these sorts of things. That's
the thing. That's where we are. We have to talk about it because that's what this team has managed to achieve. It's what they've produced. It is absolutely history.
Yeah. We talked a few weeks ago, and very much a lot last year, about Penrith lining up against Parramatta of the 80s. Which that was a great team. We're not talking them down at all. But this win probably means they surpassed that team.
Yes, they do.
We both said if they lost this year and then won next year, they would have equaled them. And to win 4 in a row, it kind of means they passed them, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Absolutely, it does.
Yeah, which is weird. It's weird we've talked about it and they did it.
I'll say this too, about these teams that have had these longish sort of dynasties in the past. The sort of team it takes to beat them is a team that's capable of going on a small dynasty of their own.
Mm.
So that South team that went from 25 to 32, the team that came along after them was that Roosters side with Dave Brown.
Mm-hmm.
The St. George team, they ended a run of, was it 5 or 6 straight grand finals by South, 50 to 55. And then it took that St. George team to win 11 straight premierships to end that run. And who'd they get beaten by? A South team that then went on 5 straight grand finals as well.
Mm.
And then it took a Manly side that went on 3 straight grand finals. And then an East side that went on 3, It takes a team that's capable of doing it year after year after year to beat one of these absolutely huge dynasties. With the Parramatta team, it was the Bulldogs.
Yeah.
So that's where we're at the moment. Who's going to be that next team that's going to end this dynasty? Is it Melbourne? Is it going to be another team? Who knows? But that's the sort of thing that people were aware of in the past that kept them watching the Dragons going, who's going to be the team to end this run? Who is it? Who is it? And for years they thought it was going to be the Magpies because they were just pouring money into their rosters.
Mm-hmm.
And yet they just kept falling short. And so you're wondering who's going to be the team that does it. Melbourne's had 2 cracks at the cherry now. They haven't been able to take the mantle off them and run away with it.
No, and like we've said, like the team that does beat this Panthers team, they are going to go to hell and come out victorious, and it's going to be like we're going to be like, holy crap, they did it.
We were thinking last year it was going to be that Brisbane side because they had everything going for them to suggest that they would be the team that could take that mantle off them. They were young, fast, good attacking team. The defence was pretty solid.
They ran away with it, and we will celebrate. Ezra Mann goes in for his 3rd try, and we all thought it was a celebration of our new champions.
Yeah. And Penrith went, not yet.
Yeah. And all of their grand final victories in this run have been very different. Like that one when they lost against the Storm, it was very much a young team game. You know, they seemed to be ahead of time. Now we know they probably weren't ahead of time, but they were beaten by a veteran team.
Yep.
The next year they play Souths, they were on even footing with Souths. It was whoever got that one got it. We didn't know how the young Panthers team would react to losing, and they reacted it basically as well as we could have ever hoped. We talked about it on the podcast, I remember at the time. And they just got that win over Souths. And then they went in and get in that grand final against Parramatta and just annihilated Parramatta. Like, still the best 40 minutes of football I've ever seen a team play against supposedly the second best team in the competition. You know, destroyed them. Then last year, looked like it's all over at about the 50th minute, and we watch. I mean, the wind starts blowing garbage across the field. It gets colder, and it's like the fucking boogeyman comes out, and they're wearing black jerseys, and they have the greatest comeback in grand final history, in what many now regard as the greatest game in grand final history. And then this year they have this just titanic struggle against a great team, and a team that's been amazing for like a couple of decades now in the Storm. And it is everything we could have hoped for, and they just strangled the life out of they strangled the life out of the Storm. Like, they've done it all the different ways you can win a grand final, basically, and it's incredible that we're witnessing it. Like, you and me don't know what happens now in a rugby league dynasty because we've never witnessed it. We've just read about it. It's crazy.
Yeah. I said, like, for me, being a historian, you only give I know I've said it before, you only ever get to read about these things. To actually sit there and see history happening like this. Like, the only historical stuff we get to see every now and then is, you know, some team racks up a massive score or someone scores a ton of points. You know, it's like a game-by-game thing or a fleeting moment here or there.
Yeah. Or like a team wins its first premiership and you're like, oh, that's their history started sort of thing. Yeah.
But something like this is, you never expect to see it again. Not with the way the game's changed. It's changed in a way to kind of essentially make it impossible for this sort of thing to happen.
Yeah.
For good reason. Because, I mean, a good example is to look at the English competition and how the fan base is dwindling there because it's the same few teams the whole time in the grand final every year.
Yeah.
Whereas over here, it just keeps going strength to strength because it's a fucking crapshoot half the time.
Yeah.
And as the West Tigers proved in 2005 is a great example. You can come from nowhere and win a title and then just disappear again.
Mm-hmm.
You can't do that over in England. So for Penrith to do what they've done, I mean, the Storm cheated for 3 years with some of the greatest players that we've seen in the last 40 years, and they couldn't even get 3 wins in a row.
Yeah.
With an illegal team.
They couldn't win 2 in a row.
And so you just go, that's what you're up against. That's what's so amazing about it. So it's I'm absolutely impressed by it, man. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah. On the individuals, and this is a weird thing to talk about. But let's say they don't achieve anything else for the rest of their careers.
Okay.
Let's just say they all wake up tomorrow and retire.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. First of all, I will cry my eyes out. Second of all, we're going to talk about it. We don't like talking about immortals until there's been time.
Uh-huh.
I find it really hard to think that Nathan Cleary is not going to be an immortal almost immediately on his retirement now. And I think Isaiah Yeo might be there.
I was going to say I'd be looking at Yeo and Cleary and possibly Luai.
Yeah, I think Luai, when he has done his thing at the West Tigers, and I've got no doubt he'll end up back at Penrith in a capacity.
If he helps West Tigers become even a consistently, let's go back to the joke. They start becoming consistently ninth again. And he helps that happen immediately. Yeah, man, you can't deny how good that bloke is. You just can't.
Look, if he has the impact, and he's going to have a bigger impact just because of his position, but if he has the impact on them that Crichton has at the Bulldogs, he's if the West Tigers end up being a finals team, even half the seasons he's there, and then he retires immediately at the age of about 29. It's crazy.
That's the thing is, it's one thing to stay in a team that's constantly successful and win all the time.
Yeah.
But to let's be honest, to put your dick on the line and go to the worst team in the comp and try and make them better, and then make that happen, that to me is evidence as to just how good a player is. Not discrediting the players who stay at a club that's successful, because there's a large reason why that club's successful is because that player's there doing what they do. But I think it takes quite a lot of bravery for a player to go and make a decision like that.
Yeah.
And like Coruscant, for example, to go there and, even I was, critical of whether he was going to go there and actually put in or not, given some of the stuff that I think he said after his last premiership win for the Panthers.
Yeah.
He made a bit of a joke about how it's going to be a struggle streak for the Tigers. I was like, yeah, I don't know if we want this guy now. He's obviously fantastic, but the attitude doesn't seem right. Is he just going there to pick up a check? But then you watch him play every week and you go, I don't know. He's legit. He's busting his ass out there and playing probably better football than he did at Penrith.
Yeah, I can't believe that. I thought that he was just going to he wasn't going to struggle, but I thought that the fact that he would be playing behind a beaten forward pack and with all the other issues, he just was not going to be able to be worth the investment. I've never seen a guy play as a hooker such a lone hand and be every game he was their best player.
Yeah.
And it was not just their best player. He was, if he was named the NRL Hooker of the Year, I'd be like, yeah, that makes sense. That good. Yeah. And as you say, maybe the best footy of his career.
Phenomenal. So I think having Luai there is going to absolutely help Coruscant a lot. It's going to help. Galvin a lot. So one thing that the Tigers have struggled at a lot has been scoring points, which has put a lot of pressure on their defence, which has then yielded too often and let in a lot of points at the end. So if they start being able to consistently score 3 to 4 tries every week, that's enough to make other teams panic a little bit more when they've got the ball in hand, and that can help your defence a little bit out.
Yeah, and I think with Luai too, he's probably a bit ahead of Cleary with the Origin resume, and it's nice to see that people this year finally sort of gave him that this year.
Yeah,
where they're it used to be he's only there because he's Cleary's halves partner at club level. But now, finally, I can't believe it's taken this long. It's oh yeah, of course, Luai at 5'8", duh, And so I think if you think of what he will do in Origin, it's, and he's got these 4 premierships at least. Add to that the 7 he's going to win at the Tigers. He's probably going to be an immortal if he does that. If he does that, there'll be the immortals and then there'll be the Luais that'll be above the immortals.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
So Cleary is in terms of halfbacks. I think he just is now with the Johns and Thurstons. I think he's moved past Sterling. What do you think about that?
It's interesting to me that Sterling is. It feels to me like Sterling is somewhat starting to get dropped further down the order.
Yeah, he definitely is by people that should know better.
I don't think is right.
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't even think that Andrew Johns was really that much ahead of Sterling. Not that much. I think the only thing that Johns had over Sterling, to be honest, was defence, which he had in spades.
Yeah.
But I still to this day haven't seen a player with the vision that Sterling had. And Sterling had to play in two very different eras of the game.
Yeah.
5-metre rule, 10-metre rule. And he started out when the game was, you still had a few of the big blokes down at the pub who'd come out and be your front rowers, and then all of a sudden they became these super fit, insane humans, and you had to deal with all of that.
Yeah, if you look at the props he started his career with and the props he ended his career with, just completely different animals.
It's a different beast of a game, and it changed so fast.
Yeah. And
he stayed on top of that the whole way through.
Yeah.
Johns didn't have to deal with that much change. And he kind of, I don't want to water it down too much, but he did get a little bit of a benefit out of the Super League war.
You reckon?
Yeah, because when it comes to playing for Australia, he was, up until that point, he was competing with Alan Langer, Ricky Stewart. And then as soon as the Super League came along, those two were not allowed to play. And so he kind of got parachuted in a little bit earlier.
Yeah, because I'm thinking about because in the 95 World Cup, he basically was Australia's best player, playing at hooker.
Yes, that's right.
And it was like, what the hell? And when it comes to international football, say he hit the ground running is an understatement.
Yes. But at the same time in 95, how many teams were legitimately strong internationally? Basically New Zealand and England.
But yeah, New Zealand and Great Britain at the time. But yeah, England.
So, I'm not diminishing because, as you
we're
said,
we're talking about like dudes that if you all swapped them with each other's careers, they all like, like no one loses a grand final because you swapped someone out.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah,
but that's the thing is that he did get a little bit of a benefit there. I think he didn't have to work as hard to get into that test side, based on who he was up against that whole time and how some of them were just not allowed to be picked because of the Super League war. Like, how much longer would he have had to wait if Alan Langer was allowed to keep playing through that 95, 96 period?
Yeah, I see where you come from with that.
So, and because he got that opportunity, and even though that opportunity wasn't even in his preferred position of halfback, it was at hooker. He was, and this is an evidence of how great he was. He was able to make that role his own, and he started doing it at Origin as well because or was it the other way around? No, that's how it was because Tuvi was halfback, wasn't he?
Yeah, that looked it all. See, this is where for me with all them halves of that era, I feel as though there were so many sliding doors moments for all of them, right? So say you look at someone that come a little bit at the end of all of this stuff, Brett Camorley, right?
Yep.
If Brett Camorley's playing right now, he is in like top 3 halfbacks unquestionably. And we're talking like it's maybe Cleary, DC and Camorley, right?
Yep.
In certain periods of time, if Camorley come along, he would have been the man as a halfback, just without question. I feel as though with all of those halves in particular in the 90s, halfbacks in the 90s for Australia, I think there were so many sliding doors moments for all of them. Like even Stewart had his moments where like an injury hurt him.
Yeah.
Or it just that Langer had, Super League come along with Langer. Langer had it probably a little different because he was really the number one choice for Queensland and that was it. It was like obviously Langer. But I feel as though there were a lot of guys during that era where they had those sliding doors moments, and I just think it was what they had to deal with at the time. Like I think I could see
that's fair.
Yeah, like I could see a time on a different timeline, right, in a different universe where Super League doesn't happen and Andrew Johns plays in like 12 extra test matches or something because it was settled, rather than being so up in the air a little bit, or a timeline where Ricky Stewart doesn't screw his knee up and he just keeps playing through to the probably early 2000s really as a top halfback, or, stuff like that. And so that's the way I look at all those guys.
That's right. And I mean, the reason why I brought that up was because Sterling still had world-class competition.
Mm-hmm.
He had Steve Mortimer there the whole way through.
Tommy Rodonigus early on.
Rodonigus at the start.
Yeah.
And then, obviously had the likes of Terry Lamb, who could play at halfback. Mm-hmm. Greg Alexander came along. Mm-hmm. These people all started in the 80s and they started hitting hitting pretty strong form late 80s, early 90s.
Mm-hmm.
There was like Des Hasler was playing in the halves back then.
A young Langer eventually come along.
Cliffy Lyons.
Yeah. Des Hasler.
There's just so many of them around there, and they're all competing, and he stayed at the top of that pack for that whole time throughout all that change. And I think that part of what he had to deal with has been diminished so much in recent times. Because I think we have had a bit of a dearth of good halfbacks since 2000.
Yeah.
And so it's been easy to just, gloss over what previous halfbacks did. That's why I've always been banging on about Duncan Thompson, because every decade they used to do this thing in the rugby league journalists. They'd publish this list of who they think the best team in the game's history was. And up until 1990, they were still picking Duncan Thompson as the best ever halfback. And then in 2000, they put Johns there. And I think that was more just because there was just no journos around anymore who actually saw Duncan Thompson play. And so the ones who were coming through were just going, how long are we going to go on hearsay for? Let's just go with someone who we've actually seen play. And that's kind of what happened. But to think that he was still on that list for 70 years, and yet he's not considered an immortal. And Sterling was the only person that came close to pushing him off that list. That's two crazy things that definitely need to be considered a lot more. And I'm not saying that Andrew Johns doesn't deserve to be an immortal. I've not been either here nor there on that. I think if he wasn't immortal now, he's going to be at some stage in the future anyway. So, what difference does it make?
Mm.
But, still, I rate Sterling a lot higher than most people do. I've definitely got Cleary in the same field as Thurston.
Yeah.
At this stage, and which is, that's pretty high praise, because we know what Thurston managed for his entire career, and Cleary's halfway through his.
Yeah, maybe.
That's insane.
Yeah,
that's fucking insane. So that's roughly where I've got him, which means he's definitely going to be in the immortal conversation. I mean, how can you not when you've won 4 premierships?
Yeah, that's what it comes down to.
I mean, Johns never did that.
Yeah, that's the thing. You go through all these players that haven't done it.
Yeah,
and it's like it. I mean, it's hard to argue when you get to that point where you're saying, like, this guy won 4 of them. How many did this guy win over his whole career? Oh, he only won 2 of them? That's cute. But that's where you start to get where you're talking about all these great players. Like, the fact that we're talking about he's in Thurston class. We're talking about, is it past Sterling? Is it past Johns? The fact that we're doing this in the Dude's 26 is ridiculous in itself.
Yeah.
And it says a lot about where it's heading.
And so, just to compare it, I guess, with Andrew Johns, Cleary's played 9 Origin games less than Andrew Johns, and he's played 20 Test matches less.
Yeah.
So crazy thing is that it's going to be hard for him to get up to Johns for the international side of things because, we had basically 2 years with no internationals because of COVID.
Yeah. And he's been super unlucky that, a number of times where he just it wouldn't be a question of who's going to be picked for halfback for Australia. He's had to get his shoulder done for a couple of years now. And then even the Origin thing, he would have played so many more Origins already if not for picking up niggling little injuries during the season.
That's right.
So that's been unfortunate. But the pure winning side, the club side is, man, it is in the whole history of the game. It's kind of weird to think about. There's not many dudes that can say, oh, yeah, I won more than him. And I think the other thing is too, if he had it, it's not like he's just got, we talk about Cooper Cronk a lot too. It's not just guiding a team around and being a solid game manager and your team has won a lot. And that's your solid game management was obviously a big factor in that. He has done the Johns I am taking this game over and we are winning no matter what moments in the grand final. And
look, that's the thing that Cronk didn't have. That's the thing that people like Wally Lewis had.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, it's time for me to do something now and get this game back to where it should be. And boom, just go and do it. That's the thing that Lockyer had.
Yeah.
It's not a huge amount of players who had it, but that's what those players were. That's why they become the immortals. And those are the little things that will be swaying in Cleary's favour.
Yeah.
The fact he's able to do that. So, long story short, at this stage, I think he would definitely, based on what he's achieved so far, he would definitely be in the conversation for immortal status. Which is good news for him because, as I said, he's halfway through his career, which is just ridiculous.
Stupid.
So I think all he's got to do is, did he play in the World Cup? He did.
Yeah, he did. He won the World Cup.
He's won a World Cup.
He's won an Origin series.
He's won everything, hasn't he?
Yeah. It's so crazy. Hasn't won a Dally M though. Nico Hines has him on that.
Oh, that's true. Has he won a World Club Challenge?
He hasn't. He
hasn't won the English Trial Series.
Yeah, I know, right? Keeps on. You know what? You can say this about him. In February, not much cop.
Yeah. Bit of a February hack.
Bit of a hack, yeah. We need to really do more at Penrith about our February recruitment.
Yeah.
So with that out the way, let's go on to more horrible questions. It feels weird. It's like asking horrible questions. And I had a discussion on Twitter about this, and this is the one that I was talking to you about. So, Isaiah Yeo, he's a 4-time premiership winning captain now, co-captain New South Wales to a State of Origin. He's won a World Cup. He's still got a long way to go. That's great. I said I think he is now in a group, in his kind of own group, behind the Raper Johns sort of.
Yeah, the Hall of Fame type players.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think he has passed some very good players. And
I'd say he's up there alongside, Brad Clyde.
Okay, so I said, look, you're the rugby league historian. I'd never say you're wrong. You're so wrong. Nah, yeah, I'd never. I believe personally he's past the likes of Clyde.
Let's be straight up there, okay?
Okay.
Two very different players. and two very different styles of football. But what Clyde was compared to the rest of the players when he came along is what Yo is now compared to everybody else that's in his position. Like there's daylight between what they are and where they're going.
Yeah, and that like Pearce was another one because he was very much in that completely different, like just.
Clyde though had the ball skills that Pearce didn't. Pearce was just fucking tenacious and mate, his motor was insane.
Mm-hmm.
So the output you're getting from him in the first minute was almost identical to what you got in the 80th minute, and those blokes didn't get subbed off. He was just ridiculous, man. Clyde had a fair bit of that, but he also had some bloody good ball skills close to the line. Yo's a different beast. Man, I haven't seen too many forwards with the amount of vision that he has.
People miss. He's a fucking giant dude. Like I think it's because his footwork is so good. You think of him as being like a bit of a smaller, built like a second rower almost. He's not a brick shithouse by any stretch of the imagination, but he's a big man. And like you saw it in this grand final with his pure go forward alone is ridiculous.
Yes.
And without question, he's got the playmaking, right? And he's also got a very big motor because he wouldn't be getting to go forward if he didn't. And he's defending in this ridiculous Panthers defense where they're all like flying around like superheroes, dragging people down left, right, and center. And for me personally, and this is just me, I think that he takes a lot of the best things of a lot of these dudes and he puts it into one package. And that's why, on top of winning 4 straight grand finals, that's where I think he surpasses some of these players. Personally, that's my opinion.
Oh, no, I'm fine with that. I absolutely just love what Yo does, man. You don't get to see too many players come along who do what he does. As I said, the one that gets me is the vision thing. I don't know, it seems a bit weird, but I think there was a moment in the first half of the grand final where he's just doing a pretty standard ruck run, but it looked like it was off a flat foot. So he's just got the ball with a second phase play.
Mm-hmm.
And he's running one way, and then he spots a gap and an opportunity that's out wide on the right-hand side. He doesn't run through it. He doesn't create an opportunity there. What he does is he runs that way so that the ball can go that way on the next play. And he does a lot of stuff like that. It's the vision to see what's coming up on the next play, and he goes and makes that play happen. And more often than not, it leads to points for somebody else. But he's done the groundwork because it's not just seeing that and recognizing it. It's also getting the quick play of the ball. So he's got that strength to do that as well. He can spot a gap. His footwork close to the line is just stupid, crazy good. Good, really good safe pair of hands. I just love watching what he does, man, because he's so in control of what he's doing the whole way through. And the reason why I compared it to Clyde, as I said, is because Clyde was doing, he was doing ball playing and all the good line runs and stepping at the line, that sort of stuff that he was well known for. But he was doing that when no other lock forward was. And he was so far ahead of everybody else at that time. And I'm just watching Yo thinking it's very similar in the sense that he looks to be so far ahead of all the other lock forwards, and he's playing almost his own brand of play. And you get the impression that the locks coming forward, because let's be honest, the locks up until Yo came along and started making a name for himself have just been basically a third prop.
Yeah.
Because, we've got enough skill across the park now. We don't need to have a ball player at lock. So we're just going to have 3 props on the field. And it's all about go forward through the middle because that's the only way to get it nowadays because everyone's so fit.
Mm-hmm.
And Yo has now changed it to the point where your lock needs to be more than just a bash and barge prop. He's got to be a lot more than that. And he's bringing the skill back into that lock position without dropping any of the physicality, any of that power and grunt that's required. And you can just see that he's becoming the prototype for the next wave of locks coming through. This is just what happens. And so you just see that that's starting to happen again. And I'm sure that there'll be some locks coming through probably in the next 5 years or so that you'll come along going, geez, he reminds me a bit of Isaiah.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Those are the players that deserve that recognition of being considered, immortals and stuff in the future, because they do that. They change the way the position is played. That's what made Arthur Beetson so bloody important.
Yeah. And I like watching him in the grand final, and the go forward was unbelievable. And the thing that gets me though is this is a guy that if he was a bit shorter, he's probably a 5'8". And not just he's probably a 5'8", one of the best 5'8" in the game. That's the thing that gets me about him. The discussion we had, and I'm not here to call people out. That's not what we do. But somebody said that he was the best hooker of all time. And somebody said, have you ever heard of Johnny Raper? And I was like, exactly, 1,000%. Johnny Raper's the best hooker, the best lock of all time, right? And then they said that, where does Yo rate against, say, Clyde, Coote, Pearce, and Price? And I said, I don't rate him ahead of Raper and Coote. And they also threw in Gallen in there, which you can imagine.
No, see, so right.
I
was going to say just quickly with Gallen. Okay, take personal feelings aside out of it. Okay, looking just at the way
they're
he
not
played the
feelings;
game,
they're called peptides.
That's fine. Gallen was the epitome of the lock forward I was just talking about, the extra prop on the field.
Extra prop, yeah.
The thing that separated him from everybody else is that he had...
Yeah, what was it called?
Before all of that, right, he still had a bigger motor, and that came down to the fact that he wasn't tall like most forwards, so he didn't have this huge lumbering body that he had to physically push through everywhere. He had the lower center of gravity, so he's harder to get down. It just meant that he was this different type of beast to deal with that's in the middle, and he didn't need to be substituted, which meant you had an extra prop on the bench. So he that's how he was important, how he was just that little bit better than everybody else, skill set wise. And a lot of it was down to the fact that his body shape and the way his body was designed is just, he wasn't 6 foot tall. He didn't weigh 120 kilos. He was 5'9", it was 5'10", I think, or 5'11", and he was about 105. He's built like most centers.
I think that's 11 and a half hands tall, they call that.
That's all right, yeah. old school talk. Yeah. I am old.
Well, horse racing talk,
I am old, remember? Yeah. Yes, I get where you get that too.
But
that's the reason why he was different to everybody else. But he's not. He's not an immortal. He's not in that conversation, and he shouldn't be.
No. This person said they rank Yo alongside the likes of Ben Kennedy.
Better than Kennedy.
Tony Carroll.
Better than Carroll.
Steve Menzies. And Sam Burgess.
Better than Burgess. Burgess is hack. I don't. This is not an English bashing thing. I don't get the love for Sam Burgess. Okay.
He had a fucking good 18 months though. Real good 18 months.
You know what? His best 18 months doesn't even come close to Ellery Hanley's best 18 months.
Oh, and pick any of Ellery's 18 months, by the way.
Yeah, if we want to talk about great, and England has had plenty of great lock forwards.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Malcolm Riley is a fucking great example there. Ellery Hanley. There's been a few others, but Sam Burgess ain't one of them. He's just not. Ball handling was atrocious more often than not. Defensive technique was loose at times, which you never got that from Riley. Riley was tough.
And by the way, nothing at international level. His best international series was when he was 18 after that duck egg.
So I've never really rated the Sam Burgess thing. I think probably his younger brothers were probably better than him, a bit more consistent as well. I still don't rate them either.
Yeah, look, George was, until just towards the end of his South career, George was pretty consistent.
Yeah.
And Thomas ended up having the the longest career out of all of them, which was a surprise.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't get that at all. But yeah, like Yo was ahead of all those players without question. Those last ones are named.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was interested to hear what you thought about Yo versus Pearce, because I know you absolutely love Wayne Pearce.
Yeah.
And it's weird because, as you say, Pearce was a completely different thing when he started. It was just such a different thing. So it's not like he got to see someone doing it, which is huge. You've got to put that into perspective. So that's another reason why Beatson was so frigging good. Like, he didn't get to see someone and say, I'm going to do that. I'm going to build on that.
I think it's true too. I mean, Wayne Pearce only played 11 years of first grade footy.
Yeah.
It's... And that's another one, as you mentioned, like the sliding doors thing before. It's another one for Wayne Pearce is, when he retired, he was 30.
Mate, Brad Clyde, his career was never the same after that 94 Test match he was knocked out in. If the second half of Brad Clyde's career was the first half, and it wasn't, it was sadly a pale imitation. If it was just as good as the second half of his career, we're talking about this isn't even a discussion. It's not a discussion.
No, not at all. But same for Wayne. I mean, if Wayne Pearce could have had another 3 or 4 years of his elite level of footy, which he wasn't that far off when he retired.
Mm.
But if he had another 3 or 4 years playing at that level, I'd be singing his praises a lot higher. But yeah, he retired just after he turned 30. That's a short career.
Mm. That puts what Reg Gasnier was into perspective.
Yeah, well, Gasnier was 29 when he retired.
Yeah, that's
Look
what
he
I'm saying.
achieved. And so, and that's what you're looking at, is the fact that Wayne Pearce had that much of a mark on the game in 10 years.
Yeah,
and Gasnier did the same thing. That's why Pearce is as highly revered as he is.
Yeah.
But I would say that if you're just comparing absolute skill sets, I've got Yo above Pearce. That's no doubt. The thing that puts Pearce above everybody else at the time and why he's revered so highly is because he brought a professionalism and a fitness to the game that was never there before. And he was able to outplay everybody over 80 minutes that were in the forwards because he was still going strong when they were all falling apart. He was fast for a forward.
Yeah.
I'd say he was probably quicker across the ground than Yo. Not by much, but quicker across the ground than Yo.
I would agree with that, definitely. Definitely.
Which was also very rare for a forward. He did this thing where he used to be able to just he'd run straight and then he'd just sort of jink and go a little bit sideways.
Yeah.
And then he did it just enough to put his outside runner on the outside shoulder of the defender. Because Wayne Pearce wasn't going to...
And he give him that short ball.
Yeah. And fucking tenacious defender, man. Ridiculous in defence.
By the way, you put Wayne Pearce in the Panthers team, we win 4 premierships. We're not degrading anybody when we talk about any of this stuff. We're like talking about the 0.001% things.
That's right.
And if we didn't talk about these things, we wouldn't be able to have the conversation, but we're willing to have these conversations.
Yeah. But I'd put Yo's skill set ahead of Pearce.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pearce just he's just outplayed players over 80 minutes. That's what he did.
Yeah. Well, I think of
every level.
I think of it as like if you took Mark Geyer and Ian Roberts, who were another two sort of different, they were a different thing when they come into the league. And if they come into the league now, it would be they would be much more suited to today's game, first of all. And they would be able to see what had come before them and add so much more to their game. Like, I could see actually Mark Geyer doing a lot of Isaiah Yo stuff, hey?
Man, I can't help but feel sad about Mark Geyer's career because...
That's another sliding doors moment, hey?
that the death of Ben Alexander just hurt him so much, and his career just fell apart after that.
Mm-hmm.
And it took what looked to be an absolutely long, outstanding career, and decimated. Also, the garbage in the night. It was a 91 Origin series where he was kind of forced to go and start trying to stir up Wally Lewis.
Yeah,
that was stupid.
Yeah,
and that wasn't all on him. That was something that was a direction handed to him that he happily went and did. But for a young forward going up against a tough competitor like that who never stood down, and for it to not work, that just went against him a little bit because he didn't put Wally off his game.
No, and
no
one
could. It's just a stupid idea. It should never have been put to him. And it's one of those things that Gaia is remembered for, is the barrage of loose, borderline illegal shit he was doing on the field to try and put the Queenslanders off, which just wasn't his natural game. And I think he started getting a reputation for it after it, which was just it's two little things that I think were not, they weren't supposed to happen in his career. One he had a little bit more control over than the other, and the other one was more detrimental to what happened to his career. But when he was playing, mate, for that period up until 1989, 1990, fuck, he was great.
And I think, had Zeus come down from heaven in a blue jersey, Wally Lewis doesn't back down. Right? No. At the same time, you go to a giant from Mount Druitt and say, unleash hell, guess what you're going to get?
Yeah.
And it just, unfortunately, it was, he gave them what they asked. They literally asked him to do it, and he gave it to them, and they were like, oh, we can't have that ever again. And it's really sad that he did what they wanted, and it just hurt him so badly.
Yeah.
In their eyes.
Yeah, it was ridiculous.
Yeah.
And so he's one of the few players I generally feel sad for, because if that madness of that 91 Origin series didn't happen, and if the accident with Ben Alexander didn't happen, fuck.
Mm-hmm.
And guys playing test footy until 1994, 95 comfortably.
Easy.
All the time. He's first picked.
I watched him play the end of his career at Penrith, and he'd slowed down. He didn't have the athleticism. He was more of a almost like a prop at that stage.
Yeah, they moved him into the front row by then.
And still an athletic specimen of a person.
Oh, mate, the powerful running was just, it never went.
Yeah.
But he lost the other edges to his game because he always had this unbelievable ball at the line. Always had that. So he'd hit the defence, and as soon as the defender sort of reeled backwards, if they didn't stick to the tackle, if they reeled backwards, he'd pass the ball. And the defences are either standing still or they're coupled around, there's two or three around him, and there's just gaps everywhere. Look, a good example is you watch that 1991 grand final. You see Guy at his peak. Yeah. Fuck, he was good in that game.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, a lot of people don't give him much credit for that, but man, I was always amazed that it wasn't him or Roy Simmons that didn't get the Clive Churchill medal for that. And they gave it to Clyde, I think it was, wasn't it?
In 91? Because Penrith didn't have a Clive Churchill medalist until 2003. Yeah. It's kind of weird.
It was nuts. But yeah, it's just a phenomenal one, that one. Ian Roberts he's just another one of those players that gets forgotten, but shouldn't, because my God, he was a devastating back rower. You think, who wanted to play against New South Wales and Australia in the early 90s when you had Paul Sironen and Ian Roberts as the edge forwards? Fuck off.
It just, a dude that, I mean, first of all, crushing defense. And not just crushing defense, athletic crushing defense. You got to step on, you're getting crushed.
Brutal. You could not get past him. He just didn't get beaten. Fuck, and there's shoulders on him, man. Yeah, there's a lot of similarities defense-wise between especially when using the right technique, which they did more often than not. Between him and Guy they're almost identical defensively. Fuck me, they would level people with just perfectly sweet timed hits. Led with that right shoulder better than anyone. Oh my God, they did some great stuff. But Roberts was, again, very similar to Pearce and Clyde, just had a big motor and just kept going the whole game. It did not surprise that both him and Sirenin, as they got to the later ends of the year, moved into the front row, where they still did the same amount of ball running and made very similar meters, but just had to get substituted every now and then because A, the game allowed it, and B, a bit older. No need to do it for 80 minutes anymore.
I think because like Pearce, obviously it was an injury thing, and Clyde, we talked about that tackle. I think, the declines that we kind of saw out of Roberts and Geyer, I think would have been held off many years with modern day training. I think they would have been kept fitter and more mobile, and their leg speed and stuff like that would have been maintained for much longer than it would have in that time where, because it was that transition from the old 5-yard rule to the 10-meter rule, they were still working out the sort of training you did with players and things like that. They've obviously refined that now, and players are having much longer careers. I think it would have helped those to have 15-year careers, easy.
Oh, absolutely. And that was the thing too. I mean, you think Geyer, Roberts, and Sirenin all started, 4 or 5 years before the 10-meter rule came in? So they started out, all their junior footy, all up until the first few years of their senior careers, have been playing this 5-meter game. And then automatically changes on a whim. And so, for those who don't know, the way that the game played for forwards, especially during the 5-meter game, was you had two types of forwards. One who ran on an angle and one who ran straight. And neither did the two do the other. Right, that's just the way they were. But there wasn't too many that ran on an angle. Most of the forwards are designed to run straight, and the goal was your backline was, go and watch some of the footage of the Parramatta team in the 80s when Sterlo was there and see how far the backline was set back. It's kind of like looking at those crazy strange slips corners when some shit batsman comes out and they've got all the 11 players in the slips. So is. Just look at it going, what the hell is it? And they're set for miles back, both sides.
Yeah.
And your forwards just ran straight, and their idea was to try and suck the defence in so that the backline that's spread out has all this room to move, because you had to create the space. It wasn't automatically given to you by that 10-metre gap between the attack and defence. So these players were coming through, and their job was bash and barge the whole way through. And then as soon as they had space to move, we started to see these forwards come in and essentially develop ball-playing skills in front of your eyes, which they didn't realise that they needed to have. So we got to see people like, good examples would be Glenn Lazarus, Steve Roach, Martin Bella, Roberts, Geyer especially, Clyde a little bit. Most of these guys, they went from being just these blokes who did really good hit-ups all the time and were just insanely good defenders to, holy shit, they've got a step at the line, or they've got a great little offload. Sirenin and Roberts always had good offloads because they just had massive hands, so they could hold the ball in one hand and just run into the forward line. They're like 6'9" and 120 kilos. There's not a drop of fat on them.
Yeah, like Sirenin and Geyer, if you put them in today's game, are like, holy shit, that dude's big in today's game.
Yeah, they're still huge, and they'd still be dominant in today's game. They were just massive bodies.
Yeah, exactly.
And so and Roach is another good example of someone who just was able to get into the line. So for the person who was suggesting Paul Gallen before, what he was doing at lock 4 was what Steve Roach was doing in the front row in the 90s. And that was, if they got into the 30 metres, the red zone, so to speak, attacking red zone. So you're in the opposition side 30 metres. Roach would do this thing where if he saw there was an overlap on the left-hand side, or, and he's out on that way, he'll take the hit up, but as he's about to hit the line, instead of trying to push through it, he'll turn his body a little bit and then get the offload away at the back. So he's sucked in a defender. The overlap that he'd already seen now becomes more pronounced because he's sucked the extra defender in and he's got the ball away. So it's going to lead to either points or just a massive amount of meters going down the field further.
A good place to see that sort of gameplay is if you look at the Kangaroo Tours, like in that era, because you've got all the elite players in that Australian team, and they're all doing that sort of game. Like that sort of gameplay is really dominant. It's a really great way to see what Andrew's talking about in those games.
And I mean, Roach was insane. And that's another thing. Like Roach and Guy have two very similar things going on for them, and people just always saw them as being fiery, aggressive, violent sort of players. And going, don't for a second look away from the fact that they were insanely skilled forwards, and they had to adapt their game real fast.
Yeah,
and the ones who did, they are the ones that were elite.
Yeah,
yeah. Roberts, and I don't even know if his career dropped off that much. Even when he went to the Cowboys, he was still ridiculously good.
I just think that, like, I really do. I think those two in particular would have really benefited. And I feel as though their peak would have been much, much longer. And I love talking about all this stuff. It's just. Like, I'm not keeping you up to it. It's really late while we're doing this. I'm not keeping you up too late, am I?
No, well, I mean, I don't have to work today.
Yeah, I didn't want you to go, man, I gotta go to work tomorrow.
Usually if we're, peek behind the curtain a little bit here, we usually record these episodes pretty late at night. And sometimes they go into them, after midnight. I know I'm not someone who sleeps much. Usually about 5 hours, which kind of blows Freaky's mind still. So if I've got to get up at 6 a.m, I'll sort of look at the clock. If it's getting around 1 a.m, I say, I've got to go to bed soon, so we'll have to wrap this thing up. He's like, when are you going to get up? I went, 5 hours. He's like, what?
Yeah, it scares me because I used to be like Andrew, but then like that changed, and I can't function on that sleep. If I can wake up, but you're not getting a human being for the whole day. Like, not just like when I wake up, and I get the whole day. You don't get a human being. You get like an automatron or something.
You get an automated email, out of office email.
Yeah. And let me tell you, not the nicest person in the world. Very to the point. Trying to think of anything if we haven't really touched on anything in the history side of it. With this Panthers team, I mean, I think To'o is, who I was thinking about today? I was thinking Matt Utai walked so that Brian To'o could run.
I don't know. I think we go above that. I think.
No,
Eric Gross.
Players.
It was Eric Gross who did that for To'o.
Yeah.
Matt Utai was just keeping the dream alive for a little bit.
Yeah, you know what it was? Because I started watching this evening. I started watching on my YouTube timeline. It come up. It was like the biggest tackles. So I started watching the biggest tackles. George Tafua. And then I was watching the worst tackles. And let me
John Apawati.
No. Let me tell you. Les Boyd. What's your different year, right? And it's obviously this era, early 80s sort of era. Les Boyd. It was fucking shocking. Right? And then I watched a game between Huddersfield and Wigan. I can't remember. It was 1981 where 6 players got sent off.
I've heard about that one.
There was a dude, and I don't know, he was the number 13 for Huddersfield, and he kept on making breaks and like really carving up Wigan. And they just decided to take this guy's head off like 3 separate occasions. He ended up having to leave the field, right? and 6 guys got sent off in that game. So you can imagine the videos that I'm watching because I'm going through the timeline just like, what's this next one? What's this next one? But it was interesting to see so many different things. Like I watched that Wigan versus Huddersfield game and I'm thinking to myself, 1 year later, the Kangaroos turn up and everything changes in English rugby league from that moment on. Like they don't even know what the fuck is going on because it is a different thing to what this is, right? Now, obviously I'm watching the worst example of English rugby league at that time, but like you can understand why when the Kangaroos turned up and they were playing the style of game they did and it was so open, even in it was a 5 meter era still. But it was so skillful and all this stuff, and it was just a completely different game. And that they really never recovered from almost the shock of that. And then it happened again 4 years later and just was never the same for them. So that was one thing that stood out for me.
The amazing thing about those Great Britain sides, though, of the late 80s, early 90s, pretty damn strong teams.
Yeah, that's the thing.
I think if you put them up against nearly any other Australian team prior to the 80s Australian teams, those British teams would have flogged them.
I agree.
My God, they were some good teams. But it shows you how good Australian Rugby League was in the 90s.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree.
I mean, that's pretty much when Australia versus Great Britain test matches were at their absolute peak. Like, you didn't see teams scoring 20 points too often in those test matches. That's how close it was. If
someone put up a big score, they played Harlem Globetrotter style football. It's like Australia in the early 2000s, where it was like, they could lead the game 40-0 at half time. And it was like, how did that happen? And it was like, you had to see it. You had to see everything work, every pass perfect. It like complete domination of possession. Field position. They did everything perfectly. Like you watched perfect football to get that. But back then it was like, say a 26-8 scoreline in a test match between the two countries. That's what it was like back then because both teams are good.
Yeah. Actually, I was just looking up that game on Rugby League Project. So it was called the Battle of Fartown.
Yeah.
It was in the 1980-81 season. And Huddersfield won 9-7. 6 players were sent off. It was Jim Johnson, Glenn Knight and Steve Lyons from Huddersfield, and Len Bolton, Alan Hodgkinson, and Nicky Kiss from Wigan.
Who was the name of the lock for Huddersfield?
Anthony Johnson.
He absolutely carved them up. Like he was running through them and like moved really well too. And I was like, because I'd never seen this dude play, obviously. And he was carving them up and they just got to the point where they were literally coat hangering him on and off the ball, by the way. And it was horror. It's like, it's not tough. It's just thug shit, you know? And like how, same thing with the Les Boyd stuff. It wasn't tough. It was thug shit. Tough is playing 80 minutes when you're a forward and you're busted, like what we saw the Storm and the Panthers just do. A lot of dudes, that's tough. So I was seeing a fair few things like that. Some terrible eye gouges I saw.
It was
and elbows. I tell you what, you forget about elbows. And just like on the ground, bang, elbow. Dude coming up behind you, bang, elbow, out, switching dudes off.
They were pretty goddamn brutal in the 80s. And what they went through in England in the 80s was what Australia went through in the 70s here. And you can tell how much of an impact that has because you look at those club games, other than the glamour teams, and there's no one watching because it's just so grubby to watch. There's no flow to the game either. There's nothing exciting about it. It's just a war of attrition.
It was horrible. I tell you another thing, just from watching the football in Australia and England from that era, I never want to hear anybody from that era talk about poor play the balls currently now. I saw one guy, there's two things that stood out for me. I saw one guy just throw the foot to playing the ball, just throw it off of his like calf, and it just goes like not even close to a play the ball, right? And another one I saw, and it was in that Huddersfield game, Huddersfield versus Wigan, a scrum. The halfback stands back and just throws like a spiral pass.
Yes.
He throws a spiral pass into the middle of the scrum. A hard pass. And I was like, what the fuck was that?
Yeah,
like,
well, so in then you weren't the second rower, or sorry, the front row wasn't allowed to put his leg out in front to try and have the ball go between his legs. It actually had to go into the middle. So what they would do is, it wasn't so much a pass, but it was a torpedo pass. The idea was when it hit the ground, it would spin back towards your own team.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So that was kind of what they were trying to do.
That makes zero fucking sense. But like, it kind of
because
worked.
You are rifling in there. If your hooker hasn't timed his rake correctly,
yeah,
it's going to bounce off his leg and fire off into the other side.
Yeah. you know, I would love to sit down with a modern day coach and look at say pick an era. Let's pick 1981 for instance, and say what do you look at and see inefficiencies with? And I think the first thing they'd say is striking at the play of the ball, because I didn't see much of that in the highlights I saw. Look, you and me have both seen striking in the play of the ball in our lifetimes. And it didn't happen when you think about it, it didn't happen as often as it probably should have, hey?
No, and look, to be honest, a part of it was because if you didn't execute it properly, you get penalised. So it was, you had to pick your times.
It was a lazy play the ball that you could do it at.
Yeah, or if there was no dummy half there, which did happen more often than you realise.
It's weird that it happens so often, eh?
Yeah. Because the other thing that you used to be able to do, but you can't now, is if there was no marker there, you didn't have to play the ball. You could just put the ball on the ground, tap it, pick it back up, and run again.
Yeah, and that happened a fair bit too.
Yeah, that's right.
I'd like to see that come back, hey?
I'd love to see that come back.
That'd be amazing.
But the raking of the ball at dummy half, I didn't see too many players do it. Benny Elias was well known as being one of the best at it. And that came down to just him being, a little bit shorter. So he's able to sort of get down to the ball pretty quick too if he did it. And so sometimes it'd be put your leg in and try and rake it back out of the the man playing the ball, try and rake it out of his hands before he puts it under his foot. The other time it would be, which he did pretty well, is if the dummy half was sitting there behind him but not looking, like he's looking around at where his players are and who he's going to pass to. He would kick the ball into the dummy half's legs so it would bounce back towards his own team and he'd fall on it.
And he turned games doing stuff like that too.
Yeah, it's an absolute art form.
Yeah.
Just freaky stuff. It was kind of one of those moments where when a new rule came in, this wasn't a new rule, but it was one of those things where it was a forgotten tactic for a long time. And then you just get a player comes back and goes, hey, we can do this, And it wasn't until we had the one-on-one strip come in and we saw players like Josh Hodgson exploit it really well. And I sort of saw that and I was watching Hodgson doing that going, this reminds me of Benny during the late 80s, early 90s doing the raking a dummy half thing. It's just you found one little skill that no one else is bothering to exploit and you're just doing it for yourself. And everyone else is going, you can't do that, can you? What? Oh, fuck. That's where his skill was at. He had to find ways to make up for other shortcomings. He wasn't a strong defender, Benny. And he was a very different skill set when it came to attack. He played more like a halfback than he did a hooker at the time, which is pretty unique for him.
Yeah, look, another one of those players that ahead of their time, like him and Steve Walters, were the first wave of that sort of player, really.
Yeah. I just want to say, Walters was better.
Yeah, he was.
It doesn't sit well with a lot of Tigers fans. I'm sorry. And that's not to do with my feelings towards Benny now and the shit he does and what he has done, but Steve Walters was better.
I'll put it this way, as somebody that's neutral in that regard. Probably the only thing I'm neutral in. You could put Steve Walters in the NRL tomorrow, and he'd probably be he might be the best hooker in the game if you put him in the NRL tomorrow. Whereas Benny Elias was an elite hooker at the time, but he would have to change his game.
I'll go one better. I'll give you comparisons as to who they were at the time.
Okay.
Steve Walters was Cameron Smith in every way, like play style and everything.
Yes.
Benny Elias was Robbie Farah. But
100%.
But Farah was a better defender. That's about it. That's straight up it. Two different styles, both very good with their styles, but the Steve Walters, Cameron Smith style was just perfect the whole way around.
You know what I think it is? Here's what I think it is. But at the time, I think Benny Elias's game was better suited to the evolving moment that the game was in. And
That's right.
Yeah. And so, like, look, Benny, right? Unquestionably, a New South Wales Rugby League origin legend. Like, one of the first you pick, for New South Wales, the guy was fucking tremendous and a leader, right? But yeah, I think he was definitely more suited to that transition moment from the 5 to the 10 meter rule. Whereas Steve Walters is, as you say, 100%. He is a today player more than he was in that transitional moment. Like, I think he was probably, even his brother would have been like, not overlooked, but maybe not appreciated for what they could have done in their moment because the game was evolving in that moment. Yeah. I hope that makes sense.
No, that makes sense. Kerrod was a bit younger, so he still had to deal with the 5 meter rule, but it didn't, he was able to play in the 10 meter rule a lot more. And so he was able to evolve his game in those earlier years make that transition a lot better. Not to say that Steve didn't, but because Steve clearly did. He was a game manager, which is that's a huge reason why that Canberra side was so good. And he's often overlooked for, when people think of all those Raiders legends, they think of, Meninga, Stewart, Daly, Clyde, blah, 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 blah. Too many people discount that Steve Walters work that he did there.
Yeah. No, look, you nailed it. He is Cameron Smith. Whereas, and I think that's why Tigers fans loved Robbie Farah so much, because he reminded them a lot of Benny Elias.
Yeah. There was a moment too where it's the video's on YouTube too, where there was a game between the Tigers and Cowboys at Leichhardt Oval.
I know what you can talk about.
There's a Farah and is it Anthony Watts?
Anthony Watts. He ended up getting banned at one point for biting a man on the penis during a game.
That's right. They went into a scrum and Watts just started smashing Robbie Farah in the face, like punching him in the scrum. And Farah had his arms up behind the two props, so he couldn't defend himself.
It was super random.
Yeah, I don't know what caused it.
Yeah.
So in the very next scrum, and the next scrum came very soon after that one, Farah went in and they did what they called the loose arm. So he put his arm up over, like put his weak arm, his left arm, up over the prop and left his right arm hanging down. And then he just started lashing into Watts and he fucked him up hard. And the crowd just fucking cheered.
He beat the shit out of him.
Oh, mate. It's fucking brutal.
I love that. I actually was talking to somebody about that moment today. Hey.
It's an absolute square up. As I said, the footage is on YouTube, but it was that little moment when people went, this is kind of like Benny versus Mario. People missed out on that. But in those cases, Benny was the prick.
Yeah.
There was a story that went around that in one game between Balmain and South, Benny bit his own hand and then went to the referee and showed him the bite mark and said Mario did it. And Mario got sin pinned.
Man, yeah, they fuck it. There's not too many players, I reckon, one-on-one let's talk about after 1980, because before 1980, like the game was a boxing match that played football sometimes, but like after 1980, there were very few one-on-one players that hated each other as much as Benny Elias and Mario Fenech. Fucking hated.
And it was Malta versus Italy or something like that, basically, the two of them.
They something like that.
Despised one another, man.
Yeah.
Fuck. And like, there'd be these times when, even as they got older, like Mario was able to adapt to the changes in the game really, really well, like better than most players did, because he went from being a hooker to he played in the second row, played at lock, finished up in the front row, still had great ball skills, unbelievable defender. But every now and then when he was moving around positions in the forward pack, whenever he came up against Balmain, I've got to go back to hooker.
Oh, man. We don't see too many of those like one-on-one just hatred games. Like Carroll versus Harrigan, where I was talking about this today, where like leading up to, you didn't have to be a Newcastle Knight, and the Knights weren't a big team back then either. They were kind of an afterthought team. But Knights playing Manly, and that's all people would talk about the week leading up was like, man, they're going to beat the shit out of each other, and they did every time. Yeah,
they'd make sure that didn't matter who caught the kickoff. You either give it to Sparta, or you give it to Harrigan, and just let them run at each other because that's what they want to do. And then they had to play Origin together.
Yeah. By the way, also after beating the shit out of each other in City versus Country too.
Yes. Oh man, phenomenal.
Can you think of a one-on-one hatred matchup now? Because I can't think of one. Hey.
The only one I could think of would be, I'm not thinking of an actual player, but it'd be a case where it's a player who was unceremoniously dumped from his team and he got to play against them again. That sort of thing.
Yeah, the like sort of revenge. It's, you know what? Yeah, it's like he wants to do well against them. Yeah. And then they start talking a little bit and he doesn't like that sort of thing. Yeah, I know what you mean.
I can't think of too many like that anymore.
No.
I know. Look, the last one I could think of was when Blake Ferguson left Cronulla.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, the reason why he wanted to leave is he wanted to go and play for a team that would win a premiership.
Mm-hmm.
And then Cronulla won a premiership before he did. And the fucking Sharks fans, every time after he made that comment, they just gave him shit for it. That was more of a fan base versus a player thing because of what he said and did. I don't know. It doesn't seem to happen anymore.
The only, because there's team ones that we see a lot. But yeah, I can't think of a one-on-one. Like I was thinking for a team one, like when the
Tigers and Cowboys had one for a while.
Yeah, they did. That was actually a really good one. That was really good. But I was thinking like when the Eels started getting cocky to the Panthers, and it was obviously happened before they met in the grand final. But yeah, the Eels were pretty fucking up, and they would talk to the Panthers. And we all know how that ended.
Yeah.
I just can't think of a modern day one, hey?
Nah.
It sucks.
We'll have to try and manufacture one.
Yeah, we should start one. That would be a good one to start. You know, when I was watching all those old games and like punching's allowed, and it made me think of like, can you imagine Jerome Luai in an era where you can punch people in the mouth? Like, how many people would have just been fucked up by him? Like, and all those dudes from Mount Druitt in that fucking Panthers side, and then
getting mouthy.
Yeah, just people get mouthy, and then all of a sudden it's just like horror shows going on.
Yeah, Fish Harris just comes in and just starts knocking people out.
Well, you know, what's that dude's name that went to the Roosters this year? What's his name? I'm having a shock with names tonight because I'm so young and beautiful.
But you've got to stop podcasting in front of all those mirrors. I know you recently had some put on the roof, but man, you just got to find a spot without a mirror around it. Keep you focused on the task in the hand.
I like
not at the task in your hand.
I like looking at myself when I do it. Leave me alone. Let me Spencer Lenu.
Spencer Lenu. Oh, yes.
Okay. You imagine you allow punching and Spencer Lenu is out there. And I'm not big on having a player where you rev him up, like we were talking about Guy and stuff like that. But I've just seen too many times where Spencer Lenu scared everyone around him and you're not allowed to punch. So fuck knows what he would do.
Yeah. That would be crazy.
Yeah.
Wow. We should probably wrap this one up, I reckon.
Probably, yeah.
Wrap it up with the knockout punch.
Yeah, it's been fun. I'm glad that we got to sort of touch on everything and talk about all the history aspects and stuff like that because, it was. I still can't believe that I've seen it happen, let alone it be my team. So it's insane.
Fully agree. And yeah, I mean that's the period we grew up in, was watching the 90s stuff. So it's still, look back on it with romantic eyes, so to speak. It was brilliant stuff.
100% we do. I mean, I know you saw lots of the 80s and 70s and 60s and 50s, but we do cross over at the 90s, eh?
I didn't get to see too much of the 40s because, I was in the war.
Yeah.
But
you were out there in the fields. Then I remember you said you got back home and you started harvesting turnips. You made a good turnip soup.
Oh, mate, some of the best turnip soup. It's great. The cue is what ails you. Good bit of turnip soup. Didn't work with the tuberculosis that was going around at the time. But they did pretty well with everything else.
Shit. You used to get the old whale oil lamp out.
That's the way. Whenever you got the old, get the eventual nits came along, just shave your head and douse it in kerosene.
Yeah. You remember when wireless come to town? You'd get in touch with your loved ones by going down to the telegram office.
Hello, stop. Oh,
I hope everything is well. Stop. By the way, 3 of our relatives have died. Stop.
Their heart stopped. Stop.
Yeah. They were crossing the street and their horse carriage come across and I said, stop.
Oh, man.
Hey.
Good times.
Shit.
Well, on that ancient note, thanks for tuning in, everyone. Make sure you check us out on all the socials. We are not going anywhere. We're going to be still recording. We've got a big history episode coming up very, very soon. We have recorded half of it, so we're committed. We've done half the work already. So keep your ears out for that one as it comes around. And we've got some internationals coming up soon, so we'll be here for all that.
Yeah, 100%. And we'll expect a lot of super random history talk where we just basically come on and basically the last half hour sort of stuff. It's going to be fun. We can't wait.
For our regular Formula One listeners, there's a few more races coming up soon too, so stay tuned for that.
Yeah, we can rack this rugby league talk off for a moment.
Yeah.
Get back to the core values.
That's what we want. All right. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Make sure to check us out on all the socials, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and we will catch us all later.